Welcome back to the channel. This is Trendy Storm and you are watching 7th and final part of What If Naruto Meets Minato after Chuunin exams. If you enjoy this video, please like, share and subscribe to the channel. Now wasting no more time, let's start the story.
The three men inside could hardly be seen in the dimly lit cavern. Two were lying prone on different parts of the table. With one hand, the third man, the surgeon, whirled a knife, and with the other, an anesthetic needle. The procedure will be the same as before. It will take approximately 2 hours to successfully and completely attach that arm. After that, the treatment will be the same. Nagato ignored Kabuto's words and looked at the man who was going to give him his new arm. Fearfully, the man stared back. Kabuto set up the area grinning. It was not surprising how they responded. The immune system of the recipient rejecting the artificial limb was one of the primary issues with transplantation. The body's immune system frequently regarded a foreign limb that contained foreign blood as a threat. With the techniques that Orochimaru had developed, it was possible and simple to perform the transplant without a donor with a similar makeup, but it took a lot longer. It was just easier on him to use a fitting donor if one was available. It was difficult to find an ideal sacrifice, and the man whose legs had been amputated for the prior procedure had extra limbs. He had learned how to function as efficiently as possible from Orochimaru at a young age. The man started to cry silently as he fixed his gaze on the surgical knife that the surgeon was holding. It would have been possible to keep this poor cripple unconscious indefinitely, of course, but that would have been boring. Kabuto moistened his mouth. No. When they were awake and able to witness the events that would shape the remainder of their lives, it was far more thrilling. Do you really think she can come up with something to extract the Biju more quickly within the time limit that you've given her? Nagato turned his head away from where he lay and said, "It matters not. The request is more a matter of convenience than necessity. There is nothing lost in trying for efficiency. If your slave is incapable, then regardless of its difficulties, the extraction will be performed as originally planned." Kabuto touched the anesthetic needle and said, "Oh-ho?" before returning it to the table. "So you're not afraid that she'd disregard your words and discover the truth? I have a safeguard prepared. If it fails, you will dispel her then. She will be of no further use to us." With a knife in hand, Kabuto approached his donor and said, "Of course." The green glow of the scalpel he held was contagious. While the man continued to struggle in vain, Nagato thought about his new arm. It would require multiple days to adjust the chakra pathways within to suit his chakra, giving the leaf valuable time to process the news of Kumo's devastation and make necessary preparations. When Kabuto successfully severed the necessary limb from his donor, a scream split the atmosphere. They have lost their minds and any trace of who they were before. Do not remove the seals I've placed on them and make no attempt to remedy their situation. Their souls are long gone from their bodies, devoured by the beast that swallowed them. In their place is only the Biju which possessed them in life. I am sorry. About your son." With a swift motion, Kushina stroked the child's hair who was once the Jinchuriki of the three. Tails. She was able to identify the seal that held the beast and even feel the Biju within. The boy didn't seem any different from a typical Jinchuriki, but still. With a start, Kushina stood up and turned to study the two. Tailed Biju's Jinchuriki. The woman appeared calm, her eyes still closed. That calm was envied by Kushina. She was experiencing almost unbearable agony. It was simply too harsh. Giving her hope and letting her feel as though she had hope, only to completely destroy it all with those callous remarks. "I am sorry. About your son. This is not how it ought to be." How was the sage aware of their disappearance? Perhaps he had witnessed their wild behavior. Perhaps, as he claimed, their souls were no longer visible and he could see them. However, what if there were elements beyond the reach of those fabled eyes? Perhaps the souls were just hidden from view by the Biju spirit. No matter how improbable those possibilities were, there were an endless amount of them. Kushina placed a hand on the unmistakably Biju seal. Covered belly of the blonde Jinchuriki. She would seize the opportunity to save herself, the person this woman had once been. Her son's salvation would result from it. Kushina placed 4 markers in the room's corners. After working for weeks to create the seal, she was sure she could restrain the two. Tails in case something went wrong because she knew it had contained the chakra of the 8. Tails perfectly. She hesitated for a moment as something in the recesses of her mind reminded her to pause and pay attention to the Sage of Six Paths' advice. What if she was making a foolish move? What if she did something that rendered the Sage's efforts ineffective? Had she betrayed the Sage? Who knows? Had she cheated on Kabuto? Kushina fell to the ground. No. It was beyond her. It was selfish of her to try to satisfy her own desires, which she should have given up long ago, by endangering humanity. She was unable to accomplish it. Kabuto had faith in her. The Sage had faith in her to complete the task assigned to her. Kushina turned to face the desk that Kabuto had set up for her and started writing in the notebook that Kabuto had given her the beginnings of some seal notations. Her eyes started to water as she wrote, and she wiped an arm over them. Still, the movement did not quell her tears. For the second time since her resuscitation, Kushina wept over the deaths of her spouse, child, and village. She felt more and more miserable the more she thought about it. Her hands went shaky. The pain started to overpower her writing skills, making the words she was trying to write appear to be mere nonsense. Kushina muttered, "Naruto." Everything that she and her spouse had labored to achieve was lost. All she had to do was concede. She lost control of the brush. She was already on board. Kabuto had assisted her in that regard. It was useless to harbor regrets about the past. She needed to focus and quiet her mind right now. Concentrate. She grabbed for the brush firmly, only to have it roll out of her grasp. When the brush clattered onto the floor, the page in front of her became noticeably damper. Nagato tried to move, but his body was incooperative. What is this? With a hard glare, the Rinnegan user met the man he had mistaken for an ally. Kabuto's smile had never been wider or more gleeful. If I had tried anything direct, I would have been defeated instantly. You suspect me and were watching my every move when I'm around you. What you failed to account for was that I could have made my move elsewhere. I poisoned your donor beforehand. You should be feeling your muscles atrophying. Your heart is slowing and your chakra systems are shutting down. Nagato's fists trembled feebly, but his fury was almost tangible. Kabuto. Kabuto chuckled. How do you like your new arm, O great sage of six paths? Don't worry. You'll still be alive. For a few moments, but you won't ever be able to move again. Haha. You get to watch as I take your eyes. The legendary Dujutsu. The Rinnegan. With a roar, Nagato let out all of his frustration at the poison's constant resistance. It seemed to get worse the more chakra he used. I never really liked you, Kabuto said, putting his face mere centimeters in front of the struggling man's. Even my slave, as you would call her, commands more respect from me than you did. Gazing intently into the snake man's eyes, Nagato's attempts at genjutsu yielded no noticeable results. He needed to take a break. There needs to be an answer. He was not going to die here. He was needed by the world. There could be no peace without him. Explain. Nagato smiled, but Kabuto poked him in the eyes. He waited for a response, and for a few seconds, neither person said anything. You're a complete lunatic. Has anyone ever told you that? They asked. For a brief moment, Kabuto's smile appeared to fade, but it soon regained its former grandeur. Well, you're a complete mass. Murdering lunatic with no leadership qualities whatsoever. Other than overwhelming power, of course, but that doesn't really count. Even your woman. Konan, was it? Even she has abandoned you. Kabuto gently stroked the man's face in a mock Orochimaru. Sama knows just about all there is to know about you, Mr. Sage. You and your pathetic existence. You should be thanking me for ending this tragedy that is your life. The world should be thanking me. Now isn't that ironic? Me? Saving the world from you? Nagato attempted to grind his teeth, but his jaw muscles were noticeably slack. He had lost the ability to speak. Every bodily function was weakened by the poison coursing through his blood and the destruction of his chakra coils. The man let out a low moan through his throat. It was his best option. Kabuto moved aside and picked up a special preservative fluid container. He turned to face the still alive leader of the Hidden Rain and silently took the fabled eyes back from its previous possessor. Nagato was limited to observing. It was the moment. Unimpressive. Nothing else could be said about it. With a sigh, Kabuto placed the jar of ringed eyes on the table beside him. The donor, the third man present, gazed beseechingly at the surgeon who had amputated 3 of his limbs. Kabuto grinned. "You do know that the same poison is running through your blood." The donor did not stop staring. "You want me to treat the poison?" Kabuto asked, implying that the answer was yes. "I can't do that. You see, the poison is made of extremely rare materials. A special concoction by Orochimaru whose malicious nature can fool even the sage's Rinnegan. Do you know what I'm talking about?" Kabuto smiled as the man started to cry silent tears. Kabuto paused to consider. "There is no cure. We haven't developed one, and you'll be dead in 10 or so minutes. Creating a cure in that amount of time is almost impossible. My deepest apologies." Nagato was still making low noises in his throat nearby. What had once been the strongest shinobi in the world caused Kabuto to look sympathetically at it. With a scalpel in hand, he approached the blind man. "Maybe I should put him out of his misery." He cut the man's heart with the scalpel, killing the self. Styled God, reincarnated sage of 6 paths, head of the most potent criminal gang on the continent, and head of the Hidden Rain. How unimpressive. Kabuto sighed once more. He now had to find a method to clarify everything to Kushina. He pulled out the scalpel and looked to see the redhead at the entrance to his makeshift operating room. Regarding the devil, Kushina started to take in the entire scene in front of her, and her eyes grew wider and more horrified. Her brain was drawing conclusions that she couldn't quite understand. The Sage of 6 Paths had just been killed by Kabuto, sweet, gentle Kabuto. Another man was lying on a table nearby, nude. There was not a single limb left on his body. She found it hard to believe. She couldn't believe what she was seeing. Kabuto would never act in that manner. Kabuto showed kindness. Kabuto aspired to preserve humankind. The sage's eyes floated inside a jar of liquid that rested on the table beside the man she had assumed to be her friend. There was no way this was what she was seeing. Kabuto set down his bloodstained scalpel beside the jar. "I can explain." Konan ran as fast as she could manage. She had not succeeded. The child she had abducted was a clone. It's possible that they had anticipated her actions beforehand. There was no turning back now. She had only Nagato as hope. She belonged there and nowhere else. The ring she wore on her finger, the tool they used to find each other, beckoned her to the hidden mist rather than to her house. He's in the hidden mist, but why? It made no difference. She would track him down and ask for his pardon. Konan took off faster to gain a better look at the surroundings. She could see no indication of a chase below. Minato could have easily tracked her down and killed her if he had wanted to. Why would he hate her for what she had attempted to do? What made him release her? Was she loved by him? Konan dismissed the idea with a head shake. Any residual feelings she might have had for the man had to go. It made no difference that they had experienced similar losses in the past, losing loved ones and having a teacher with similar values. It made no difference that they were incredibly intimate, something that is hard to find in any human relationship. It had been the worst kind of lie he'd ever told her. They had pledged to save Nagato. They had pledged to protect the Hidden Rain from any harm. Those 2 assurances had been broken. There was no turning back now. Just forward. Though delusional, Nagato's beliefs were not without merit. He would lead her down the correct path, the way to a better society. A reality where the terrible event of Yahiko's passing wouldn't have to happen again and again. It was a peaceful world, one that Nagato could bring about, and one that was worthy of fighting for. She finally reached the location of the former hidden mist after hours of flight. The village was scattered across the landscape, the ruins of the buildings that once stood there. It was a devastation scene. There were a few people mingling down below. Most likely, they were from one of the other hidden villages. The hidden mist ruled over a vast area of land. The vultures that hoard land have arrived to stake their claims now that it has been destroyed. It was repulsive. Silently, she descended from above the cloud cover toward a remote area. Nagato was beneath the surface. It was the place she had to be. Kabuto lied and said, "He made me do it. I had no choice." Kushina said nothing more, and Kabuto continued telling his tale. It's been 13 years since your death. Your son is alive, the leaf has not been destroyed, and there is no 10-tailed Biju. Kushina shuddered. She had been duped. She wasn't sure how far the deception had gone. The horrific sights in front of her and Kabuto consumed her thoughts. She listened to what he had to say because she trusted him, and a part of her still encouraged her to do so. How can I trust you? Kabuto begged, you have to understand. Kabuto pointed to the body that was lying on his table and said, as if said, I had no choice. He is no sage of 6 paths. His name is Nagato. Merely a delusional man and leader of the Hidden Rain who just happened to be born with the Rinnegan. You've lied to me. Who are you? I'm Kabuto. Yakushi Kabuto. I studied under Orochimaru. That was no lie, and I'm not really from the Hidden Mist. I'm like you, a citizen of the Leaf. You have to believe me. Kushina started to retreat. This was too much for her to accept. It had been untrue that Kabuto was suffering for the village he had supposedly lost. All of Kabuto's statements to her had been false. She felt afraid. She had no idea who this man was who had called her back to life. The tears you shed. For the family you never had. Those were lies too? Yes. Kabuto trailed behind the redhead who was backing away. It was to convince you of the story. Now that Nagato is gone, I can tell you the truth. And believe me when I say that I am telling you the truth. I'm not trying to get you to do anything, and if I really were your enemy, I would simply dispel you. You are nothing more than an Edo Tensei. Doomed to disappear either when your soul has achieved peace or when I release it. I'm spending time explaining this to you because I care about you, Kushina. Kabuto narrowed the distance between them and put his hand. If nothing else, I want you to trust that I am your friend. Please. Trust me. After examining the hand for a moment, Kushina extended her own hand to shake it. Kabuto grinned. I'll start from the beginning. Then you will understand why you are here. I'll take you back to the Hidden Leaf afterward. Don't worry. Your son is alive and well. I'm sure you'll be very happy to see him. With a nod, Kushina followed him back into the lab, and the doors shut. The instant those doors shut, fragments of paper gathered from the cave walls encircling the opening, forming the outline of a woman with blue hair. It had not been difficult to find an entrance, knowing that there was a place hidden underground. While descending, she had come across the red-haired figure making her way through the caves to the location she believed Nagato to be, and she had followed. Had she only realized the truth back then. That pitiful snake who had served under Orochimaru had killed Nagato. Her eyes filled with tears. Nagato was wrong to put his trust in them. Both Kabuto and Orochimaru. This was the second time the two had betrayed them, and Nagato had paid the ultimate price for it on this occasion. Maybe he shouldn't have driven her away in the first place if he'd been so desperate for people. He ought to have made an effort to persuade her to stay. His defiance proved to be his undoing. She might have been beside him. He would not have died this way, most likely, if she had been present. You foolish one, Nagato. Konan started to consider her next move, not letting her tears fall. Kushina Uzumaki. The one who had pierced Minato's heart. She had been able to slip in, fill it, and repair the damage because of that pain of loss. Minato gave him back the solace she had given him. Their easy bonding was facilitated by a mutual and profound understanding between them. Now, for whatever reason, Nagato was dead and Uzumaki Kushina had been brought back to life with the Edo Tensei. Konan pulled herself together. She was aware of her obligations. She was going to get even. It was not right for Nagato to pass away in that manner. She would then see to it that Uzumaki Kushina's incarnation was never given the opportunity to return to her home. She had spent many years communicating with Nagato via Yahiko's corpse, so she was aware of the suffering that would result from their meeting. Minato didn't require such suffering. Uzumaki Kushina should stay dead because she was already dead. With a firm resolve, Konan set out to set up a trap that would kill both the undead woman he had summoned and the man who had killed her childhood friend. Deep in the early morning, the sun would not rise for several hours due to the Uchiha compound's shadow. After reporting the attempted kidnapping, Naruto went to sleep, and his friends stayed behind to join him. It had been hours since then. Minato sat on the roof and let the evening breeze caress him. Obito's suspicions were confirmed by Conan's self-serving action, which was motivated by desperation. He could be there at any time thanks to the seal he'd put on her ring. In addition, there were a lot of seals in the apartment. He witnessed Naruto leave the building, and would chastise the boy for it later, even though it was a good idea for him to leave. That was why he hadn't reacted when he felt her slowly but surely making her way into his house. Knowing how much the loss of Naruto would have hurt him, she had pursued his son, and now she had the gall to accuse him of betrayal. Even if Naruto had been abducted in reality. Out of the shadows, a shinobi appeared beside him, breaking his train of thought. The new arrival took a seat and put 2 cups of steaming water in front of them. So where is she now? With caution, Minato took the cup and sipped the water. She traveled in the direction of the hidden mist. From the surroundings of the area in which she landed, I think it's safe to infer that she is in fact in the land of water. Now she's underground and clearly following someone, but that is all I know. The person is outside the range of my seal. Underground. Hidden mist. If there's a secret base underneath the hidden mist village, it's probably some sort of lair that once belonged to Orochimaru. He had an appetite for underground hidden laboratories. I wouldn't be surprised if one of these laboratories were built under the hidden mist. Minato gave a nod. It had all been set up that day when they'd forced the woman into her apartment. Even if she had responded differently or succeeded in passing Obito's test, the outcome would have remained the same. It was obvious that her desired outcome did not include Nagato's demise. It was regrettable. If only she had consented to carry out her current actions as a missionary rather than an enemy. Minato let out a sigh. The assassination would be finished and the war would be won once the woman was within 3 meters of her prized Nagato. She might have known this and had communicated with her leader to set up a preemptive trap for him. Another possibility was that Nagato would just kill her. The plan was not without risk, but the payoff was huge. Tens of thousands of lives could surely be saved if the war's inevitable battle had been avoided. How much was 1 or 2 lives at risk? Danzo stated that it was in the best interests of everyone involved, and if that meant jeopardizing his and Conan's lives, then so be it. His companion stood up and stretched, saying, "Well, I'll leave you 2 to it. I'll be going to, do some other important things." Important things, Minato chuckled briefly. "Oh sure you are." The man exclaimed angrily, "Hey. Women are important. They're what brought us into the world. Have some respect." Obito laughed to the other side of him. "Sensei, you do whatever you have to do. We'll call when we need you. See? He understands me. I'm off. I can't keep Tsunade-chan waiting. Send me a toad when I'm needed." The man disappeared into thin smoke. Tsunade-chan. Minato shuddered. How could Jiraiya have the audacity to say such things, he wondered. It seems as though the man didn't think highly of himself. Obito said, "Pass me the water." Taking the other cup, Minato gave it to his pupil. "Anything happening yet?" "No, but she's setting up some kind of physical trap." "For you?" "No. Not this kind of trap. If she were aware that she is being tracked like this, she wouldn't be setting up something so blatantly. Whoever she has followed is probably an enemy of hers." Obito trailed off, saying, "And she is our enemy. An enemy of an enemy. And Minato said, is not necessarily a friend. We will only get one chance to do this. Saving this enemy may very well ruin the mission. We will only make our move when she is within the proximity of our target." "That seems like the sensible course of action," Obito answered, quickly downing half of his cup and setting it down. "I'll be ready." As he skillfully stored the scrolls holding the bodies of his 2 most recent victims, Kabuto continued to converse with the still frustrated redhead who was with him. "Those Jinchuriki that he's shown you have all been captured after failing to defend their villages. Villages which he destroyed. The people slaughtered. Like sheep." The redhead needed a moment to process what was said. "And the hidden mist was home of one of these Biju?" Kabuto answered, "Yes. The 3 Tails Jinchuriki, Yagura. The Mizukage. So he was capturing Biju in order to create a weapon, you say?" "Yes. A weapon which he would use to threaten and destroy any nation that would oppose his vision of peace." Kushina fixed her gaze on Kabuto. The man embodied the epitome of genuineness. She looked away, gazing into the jar once more. The container that held. What are you going to do with those? She faced Kabuto again, who grinned. I'm going to give them to you. Why? Do you still doubt me? Kabuto asked, his smile still intact as he extended his hand to stroke the woman's face, making her feel uneasy inside. She stayed motionless on the outside. Kabuto let his hands drop back to his sides and said, "You are the most beautiful human being in the world. You remind me of the woman who I had all but forgotten. You remind me of Mother." Kushina relaxed inward and opened her breathing. Who is Mother? Kabuto gazed into the dark sclera of his Edo Tensei. She is a dream. An identity. I had once lost. Kabuto leaned forward so that his face was only a few centimeters ahead of hers. Though Kushina's first instinct was to turn away and flee, her hands were gripped tightly by his, keeping her from doing so. After pausing, with his eyes still fixed on the woman in front of him, Kabuto pressed his icy lips to his undead attendants. Kushina whirled around. A part of her told her to accept the situation as it was. She was informed by it that Kabuto wasn't a bad man. That he was acting in her best interests. A different part of her mind angrily cried out to her, piercing her heart and mind with the image of the man she had loved. In addition, she had to endure months of lies, which demonstrated to her the extent of this man's deceit and manipulation. Yet, the same part of her brain that advised her to accept Kabuto's gesture also informed her of Minato's passing. What was taking place was simply a way of moving on, not a betrayal. Did she wish to move on, though? For what reason should she anticipate anything? She had passed away already. She would ruin her memories and her happiness in the past if she did this. Kabuto had to be fully aware of her circumstances. Throughout the long days she'd worked for him, she'd told him everything about herself, all the while holding on to the hope that her efforts served a higher good for all people. She was being told to trust him even though he had lied to her earlier. Could she really put her faith in him? Before she could fully process the internal conflict, Kabuto withdrew her thoughts and let them crash into one another. And besides, as an Uzumaki and former Jinchuriki, your chakra capacity is immeasurable. Add to that the fact that you are an undying Edo Tensei with infinitely regenerating chakra, Kushina. You are quite easily the perfect candidate to receive those eyes. Kabuto approached the jar and held it casually in one hand. The man paused for dramatic effect, a smile spreading across his face. You would be able to perform techniques that would normally cost so much chakra that it would drain from your lifespan. Techniques which can move mountains, reshape landscape, and destroy entire hidden villages. Returning to Kushina's side, he let a chilly hand descend once more on her cheeks. You could even resurrect the dead. After finishing her preparations, Konan waited outside the room where Kabuto had disappeared. At the door of that room stood a clone, ready to spew hate speech. She would have known if they had attempted to flee in any direction, including below. Every region was protected. No matter how quickly they ran, there was absolutely nowhere to run. The snake would be buried far below in this icy cave, never to be seen again. There would be no one to mourn him when he vanished from the face of the planet. Konan tried to find solace in the thought as she pressed her fingernails against her palm. She would still have nowhere to go and Nagato would still be dead even if she was successful. She couldn't shake the feeling that her attempt to abduct the aggressive boy who happened to be Minato's son had been the ultimate foolishness. He went by Naruto. The boy was always interfering in her relationship with his father, demanding his attention at all times and creating obstacles for them to make plans. Not surprisingly, Minato made the decision to grant his son's wishes in that respect. With Naruto almost reaching adulthood, the father had limited time to lavish his affections on his son. Though she understood, she still felt resentment towards the boy. The fact that Uzumaki Naruto was Minato's son and the Jinchuriki of the Nine Tails was an amazing misfortune. With a somber expression, Konan peered down the dimly lit passageway that led to the subterranean facility. She would figure that her presence had somehow already been noted after 2 more minutes passed. She would set off the trap if that were the case. It would be preferable to start things on her terms as opposed to theirs. Furthermore, if they were holed up, waiting for her to go. Konan gave a sadistic smile. They are free to reconsider. Explosive seal tags covered every opening in the cavern and every escape route for hundreds of meters, no matter what tricks Kabuto had up his sleeve. There was no way out. Her supplies would be severely reduced, but there could never be too much preparation against a foe as cunning as the one she faced. Uzumaki Kushina would vanish and Kabuto would pass away. From the moment Kushina stepped inside, Kabuto felt the third presence. He had detected her scent. He knew exactly who she was, and he could taste her. Of course, the Akatsuki's Konin could set traps that few would be able to escape given enough time and her abilities. She had to be able to recognize her Nagato's death. Her presence was unwanted and, unless he ran away, certain to result in his death. His mind flashed these ideas as Kushina's horror broke at the sight of what she would almost certainly regard as a scene of atrocities. But he would be leaving the Rinnegan behind if he managed to get away. He would always feel the guilt and weight of that loss, the loss of the strongest Dujutsu in the world. He was unable to give up on the Rinnegan. Not now that he was holding it. There was no assurance that he would succeed even if he did select this course of action. Konin was a formidable kunoichi who could perform some incredible feats of strength that would have Deidara green with jealousy. Neither Kushina nor he was suitable for her in their current states. His brain raced to come up with a fix. Orochimaru's notes on Jiraiya's years spent in the Hidden Rain indicated that while he could easily implant the eyes in himself, the powers they bestowed would not manifest instantly. He would not have had a phony Uchiha Madara to teach him the Dujutsu, nor did he possess the same natural grasp of its powers. It would be all new information for him to learn. Even with their greatness, the Rinnegan could not deliver him. At that moment, the answer appeared to him in the shape of a young girl with red hair who was innocent. Kabuto's plan was coming together as he set his scalpel down beside the jar containing the Rinnegan. He was aware of multiple facts. First off, no matter what harms they endured, those who were brought back to life by the Edo Tensei would always be brought back to life. Second, until the incarnated soul attained peace or until he personally dispelled it, the Edo Tensei did not dispel. Peace was a long way off in Kushina. He had made sure of the turmoil that had been plaguing her soul for the last 2 months. Thirdly, he carried the Rinnegan, which possessed the ability to bring the dead back to life. Now that he'd let her in and closed the doors, there was no doubt that his time to die was almost over. Konin was a meticulous person, so she would make sure of that. He knew all of these things, and he knew he had the redhead as he planted a kiss on her. She would see him as someone she needed to resurrect, if only to get answers, even if she did not reciprocate any affection she felt from him. He did not lie. Even though Uzumaki Kushina was a very attractive person by most accounts, he couldn't help himself because of how easily she could be tricked, how innocent, and how foolish she was. He needed to take advantage of her. She resembled a beautifully placed set of dominoes. The sheer beauty of witnessing her ruined in every manner overwhelmed any guilt he felt for her. He had at last found himself in this. He was an artist, and the subjects of his paintings were individuals such as Uzumaki Kushina. And even if he had looked, he could not have found a canvas of a higher caliber. At last, he could comprehend why he had felt such admiration for the former Akatsuki leader. It was his miserable life and the circumstances that led to it, not his strength or position as a leader over the strong. It had engulfed him, its ending captivating him. As he gently stroked that man's cheeks, he sensed the first stirrings of his calling. Next was Uzumaki Kushina. As an Edo Tensei, she would eventually learn how to resuscitate him even if she didn't do so right away. He needed to instill that idea in her mind. It was only partially true that she would not be able to revive him at all if she didn't revive him as an Edo Tensei. Next, though, he would dispel her, take her Rinnegan, teach her to master the Edo Tensei, bring her back to life, and use her to kill her own husband and destroy the Hidden Leaf. She would experience pain, but it would also be breathtakingly beautiful. He gave the woman one last kiss and felt almost shiver with pleasure. Kushina, gazing at him doubtfully through her fresh eyes, listened as he described the attacker that he had, ironically, only just been able to detect. With a well-rehearsed expression of grief and loss, Kabuto delivered his parting remarks. He was unable to give her instructions. Should he do so, she would be aware of his hidden agenda. When she realized she had that ability, he had to let her resurrect him on her own initiative. You will live on. My soul will wait in the afterlife. I love you, Kushina. He would get out of the fight. Without losing the Rinnegan, he would make it out of there alive. Look, Orochimaru. Sama. You have always desired the Sharingan, but you were never successful in obtaining it. However, this is where I've accomplished the Rinnegan here. The best possible Dujutsu. Salutations, Orochimaru. Sama. Take a look at my progress. As everything around Kabuto caught fire, these were his final thoughts. As millions of explosive tags blasted everything inside Orochimaru's hidden cavern complex into dust, his body broke apart in the heat and impact. The ground trembled violently at the foundations. Konan sent chakra into the soles of her feet to help her stay balanced on the uneven ground. It was completed. Why did she feel so empty when she'd succeeded and Nagato had been avenged? Now what? The chilly breeze caused her cloak to flap. It was a relic from long ago, a reminder of a time she no longer seemed to be able to recall. She was immune to the cold for a long time. The rain was the only thing remaining. If Nagato hadn't placed her on the blacklist, she would have gladly accepted the position of leader of her village. The people of Rain had a fervent, religious devotion to their god. She had received the same treatment as God's angel, but she had lost everything the moment he turned her into a public enemy. She had no chance of going home, not until the man granted her an official pardon, which was never going to happen. The Rain would not open to her again until it found a temporary leader to take her place until Nagato returned. However, Nagato was not going back, and her word was useless. Gazing upwards, she saw the dense, black clouds looming over the night sky. Now what? The subterranean cave complex was extensively devastated. Entire rooms collapsed and tunnels fell. Many sleepless nights of labor were lost when the seals that decorated the cave walls, hundreds of hours of labor, were destroyed along with the walls they were etched on. Simultaneously with the destruction of the seals came the sudden release of the Jinchuriki who had been rendered unconscious by the seal's power. Yagura was the first to awaken, and the Biju within voluntarily gave him its form to prevent him from being crushed by a huge falling boulder. The enormous turtle supported the weight of the cavern ceiling on its 4 legs while guarding the other 2 Jinchuriki. Unexpectedly, Yugito noticed the underside of a massive shell that resembled a crab. She had a feeling that this was Jinchuriki, the 3 tails. And close by. Yugito jerked her head to one side and down. Killer B was the one. She exclaimed, B. But got no answer. The man lay on his table, blissfully unaware of the walls around them that were falling apart quickly. She moved over to give her fellow Kumo Nin a shake. Never in her life had she been happier to see Killer B's eyes on her. B blinked slowly, like she was sleepy. Yugito. Sexy as ever. See you, I thought I'd never won. Yugito chuckled. That was terrible. You've sunken really low, Killer B. The man smiled. Sanbi. Need help? Yagura grumbled, his voice betraying the strain he was under. Some help would be nice. Without saying anything more, the 8 tails materialized and pushed the turtle away. He sent a concentrated beam of the Bijudama upward with a massive surge of power. The 8 tails held against an increasing amount of falling debris and said apologetically, that was supposed to blow a hole straight into the sky. Looks like we're much deeper underground than I thought. Gyuki. The 3 tails pushed Yagura out of the way and took control. I haven't seen you in. What was it? 200 years? The octopus casually replied, give or take a couple decades. Beneath the 8 tails, a huge fiery cat emerged and used its paws to dig an upward tunnel. Matabi! Exclaimed the 3 tails with joy. I didn't think you'd ever work with humans. What a surprise. Nah. Sanbi hates Yugito. She's got on a leash yo. The words that were emerging from the 8 tails' mouth made the 3 tails shudder. To hear Gyuki appear any less intelligent than he usually does. How awful of a Jinchuriki he was. He backed off, allowing Yagura to regain command. The Mizukage transformed back into his original form and hid beneath the 8 tails. He pointed to the widening tunnel that the 2 tails Jinchuriki, Yugito, had disappeared into and said, you should go too. I'll follow. I understand, little man. So what's your name? Tell me if you can. The former Mizukage answered, Yagura. Can you please speak normally? Ignoring the request, B exclaimed, Yugura. Ha ha ha. He then used the thick tentacles of the 8 tails to widen Yugito's tunnel and started to worm his way out, saying, alright kiddo. We're getting out of here, let's go. Yugura called after his fellow Jinchuriki, trailing behind it, and don't call me kiddo. I'm not a kid. He winced. Recollections of his conversations with Mei were flooding back to him. His village had been devastated, Mei was dead, and the man who had killed her was gone. Yugura vowed to himself that he would track down the man wherever he was and ensure that he was held accountable for his actions, even if it meant losing his life. A fiery paw protruded from the ground. It was almost immediately followed by the enormous, fiery cat figure. The knight drew away from the unsettling blue flames coming from its body. With her body's chakra coursing through it, Yugito's eyes allowed her to see far into the night, and her senses locked onto the signature of a woman. A shinobi. Her piercing eyes focused on her intended victim. The woman had blue hair, and the Akatsuki cloak was blowing in the wind atop her body. The Akatsuki. Yugito considered resignedly. It seems they had expected the Jinchuriki to be able to get away. The woman was probably some kind of sentry. As the woman approached her, she kept a close eye on her. No. She was not fit to be a guard. The woman would have reported the flaming two-tailed Biju that would have emerged if she had been a sentry. Rather, the woman appeared to be gazing at the sky without moving. Yugito started to walk away, seeing how the woman would respond, but she stayed put. She could not have been unaware of the enormous flaming cat in the middle of a deserted nighttime landscape. The woman was either using genjutsu or... The boy who was holding the 3 tails was swiftly followed by B, who emerged in human form as the earth trembled. When Yugito swiftly returned her focus to the woman a few hundred meters away, she saw that her posture had not changed. Strange. With a peculiar tone that seemed to break his voice, Yugura looked around. This was my village. Yugito asked, his gaze never taking off from the statue-like form of the Akatsuki. Woman, where are we? And who are you? This is the Hidden Mist. I was its Mizukage. My name is Yugura. Yugura. The ruthless leader of the Bloody Mist. The man responsible for the Civil War. You're saying that's you? But you're only a child. That's all in the past, and though I may appear to look like one, I am no child. Yugito looked warily at the man who called himself Mizukage. What do you plan to do now, Yugura, now that your village is gone? Yugura looked up into the big yellow irises of the cat, defiant. I'm going to find the man who destroyed my village and slaughtered my people, and I'm going to kill him. What about you? Where are you from and where are you planning to go? B and I are from Kumo, which has suffered the same fate as your village. If you would have me, I would join you on your quest. B interrupted, turning the other 2 Jinchuriki to face him. Bakayaro. Kanoyaro. Revenge is lonely and will only lead to sadness. I know. I've seen it. I'm a witness. Yugito angrily exclaimed, you who never treat anything seriously. You don't understand anything. I don't care what you think you know about vengeance. If the death of your village doesn't send you into hatred, then you know nothing. She moved in the direction of the Akatsuki lady. She would know the answers. It was fortunate that the woman happened to be here. The woman would be forced to lead them to the man who was in charge by crushing her with her teeth. She felt something coil around her all of a sudden. The 8 tails' formidable tentacles ensnared her beneath its overwhelming strength. Yugito yo. Not everyone is dead, Yano? We should help the villagers rebuild their lives, not throwing away our own to some stupid fight. Come back with me. To Kumo. No. You see her too. That woman. The Akatsuki. She is an enemy. Yugura inquired, where? 600 kilometers away. I'm looking at her right now. Yugura, the Mizukage of the Hidden Mist, was gone before B could even respond. B let go of his fellow Jinchuriki with a sigh. Yugito. You fool. I was taken by Orochimaru at a young age. I trusted him, but he abandoned the village and took me with him when he departed. That's when I started working for him. He was with the Akatsuki. Never have I had an option. I've been raised to be obedient. The difficulties I encountered. Even thinking about them hurts me. Her body was reshaping piece by piece, and Kabuto's words continued to replay in her head. Normally she wouldn't have been able to see anything because it was so dark, but Kushina's gaze strayed. Everything was incredibly clear. She could see every detail in the rocks surrounding her, even the smallest one. Everything had a chakra, or sort of life, to it. If it wasn't in a usable form, it was still present everywhere. With closed eyes, she could still make out a faint image of it. She grunted as she hauled herself up. If her estimation proved accurate, all the tunnels extending for miles were blocked off. She was underground, by herself, and very, very deep. I'll probably give you these eyes and you'll develop perfect eidetic memory. Arrives with the eyes. You should commit the Edo Tensei to memory. If you so choose, you'll be able to let go of yourself. Kushina reviewed the information she had learned. Kabuto was accurate. From the moment she'd received her eyes until now, she could recall every detail. She does indeed have perfect recall thanks to the eyes, something Minato appeared to be able to do. She fought, brushing aside bits of rock and dirt. She was fortunate not to have claustrophobia. Minato. She didn't want to try and didn't know what to think anymore. She had to get out right now. She had to be submerged for at least a kilometer. She dug through the dirt with another grunt of effort, pulling out another handful of sediment. It would take years for her to surface at her current rate of progress. She paused and allowed herself to be aware of her surroundings. She had never been able to shape chakra as well as she could now, thanks to the Rinnegan, which gave her the ability to see its essence. It was almost a given that she could now control every element, if she had to guess. There was still more. Something was calling out to her. Something beckoning her. With wide eyes, Kushina said the words that seemed to come out of nowhere. Gedu. Subsequently, she vanished into an impenetrable obscurity, beyond the reach of the Rinnegan. Yagura took a cautious approach to his target. The fact that it wasn't raining was too bad. If it was, he would have an easier time feeling her precise location in every proportion. He belonged to the rain. When he eventually found her signature after a few moments, he nearly jumped. He was practically standing beside her. He attacked right away, and several water lances protruded at his target in a matter of seconds. He was surprised that the woman did not move at all, and that the first few lances had punctured her in potentially fatal places, causing her to cough up blood before he could even stop his own jutsu. Yagura cursed. She had to be here. If she was dead, then she was no good. He hurriedly threw a few more water lances, hitting the woman in the arms and legs, immobilizing her and preventing her from retaliating. The sound of the woman's flesh being pierced filled him with a deep sense of satisfaction. Sweet revenge, and she was still a part of his group even though she hadn't been the one who'd done it. She remained an adversary, and adversaries were unworthy of compassion. Bending over the woman's body, he seized her by the rumpled collar of her cloak. "Where is your leader?" He cuffed her hand across her face so hard that her head bounced against the dirt when she didn't answer. "The man with the Rinnegan. Where is he?" He felt something strange suddenly, and before he knew what was going on, his vision turned cloudy and dark. Konan sobbed as her rescuer rolled her former attacker off her body and revealed himself. "Kill me." "Why?" She sobbed, at last letting her tears flow. "I have nothing left. There is no reason for me to be alive." Minato could not help but notice how awful she looked as she leaned forward and wiped the tears from her cheek. Her eyes and face were getting bruised. "You're being melodramatic." Konan erupted into laughter at that. She laughed as though her life depended on the act, in spite of the spear of water that had opened up her midriff, the bleeding holes in her arms and legs, and all the pain she felt from doing it. She laughed until her throat began to bleed, and then she laughed some more. "Konan." Minato cut off the woman's fit of hysteria with a stern word. "I'm taking you back to receive treatment." Konan's voice was far quieter than before, and she completely forgot the retort she was going to offer. "Minato." Her vision was swimming from the loss of blood. She didn't give a damn. It would be best if everything ended sooner. Minato suddenly turned to deflect a blow to his head. She was surprised to see the new attacker move away and be recognized right away. Yugito was it. I remember seeing you when I was in Kumo. What are you doing? Yugito growled, Namikaze Minato. Kumo has been destroyed. I am aware. That woman is associated with the Akatsuki. She is one of our enemies and will lead us to our target. If you persist on defending her, you will be treated as an enemy. Konan breathed weakly and said, Nagato is dead. What? Minato asked, returning his focus to the dying woman. He was killed by. Konan came to a halt. This was not how she was going to immortalize his name. That was not fair to Kabuto. He was killed by petty betrayal. Yugito said in a wonder-filled voice, dead. Konan said, blood streaming down the side of her face, if you'd care to dig a kilometer into the earth where you stand, girl, you might even find his corpse, though I doubt that. There's nothing left. I destroyed all of it. His body, the underground tunnels. Before stopping speech, Minato placed a hand on Konan's shoulder as Yugito remained silent. Yugito was left standing over Yagura's unconscious body as the two disappeared. There was a long pause before B's voice broke through the darkness. Yugito. I'm going back to Kumo. I'm rebuilding our village, you're coming with me. Help out old killer B. Yugito hefted the unconscious Yagura onto her back while remaining silent. Let's go then. She was able to see that she had been engulfed by something when the darkness parted and the object she had been enveloped in opened. Devil. The demon disappeared as it sank back into the ground. Kushina surveyed the area. She was in a cave once more. Sort of. Caves were becoming unbearable to her. She desired to see her home surrounding green forests, grass, and sun. She had had enough of the dark. She became depressed as a result. Her mind instantly returned to Kabuto. What if Kabuto had been lying too, in his last words? It was conceivable. Even though he knew she would be stuck a kilometer below the surface, he could have given her the impression that her son was still alive. He most likely thought she would try to wriggle out, which would take an eternity. He could have done it to encourage her to press on when everything else seemed lost. To be sure, one of the main things that would keep her going for years was the notion that every step she took brought her one step closer to the child she had given birth to. She could easily picture him taking that action in order to support her in surviving whatever ordeal she might be thrown into. It was the kind of person Kabuto was. It was, in fact, rather convenient that he'd only just sensed the intruder after inserting the Rinnegan into her. He must have known ahead of time and rushed the transplant process because he didn't want to worry her. She made the decision to follow a cave path. Anything that occurs will occur. Casting doubts had no effect. She was determined not to waste the second chance at life that Kabuto had given her. She staggered into a big room with some visible furniture. A table was present and Kushina discovered herself gazing at a lifeless body. The skeletal remains of a deceased shinobi. Above that corpse stood a massive statue that seemed to be the roots of some unimaginably large tree. It protruded from an even larger structure. The Mazo Ghetto. She was only aware that its name came to her as naturally as when she had first said it. She had no idea how she knew. That was the skeletal remains of some sort of creature, something that was once powerful and still was, but that was now only a shadow of its former self. She didn't care that she wasn't exactly sure what it was. She had to figure out how to get out of this situation and where she was going to go next. Namikaze Minato, her spouse, would be the first person she would bring back to life if she were truly able to learn how to do so. She would naturally need to free his soul from the Shinigami first. She knew exactly how she was going to accomplish that. Somewhere in Uzushio was a temple that housed a certain mask. Once she had established that her son was alive, that was the place she needed to go. She would attempt to learn every skill that she might now possess along the way. What was stopping the Rinnegan from reviving everyone if she really had the powers that Kabuto had described to her? She would bring Naruto back to life if Kabuto had been lying and he was dead. She'd bring Kabuto back to life. She'd bring Minato back to life. She would bring her village and even her parents back to life. Her rebirth as an Edo Tensei was a fortunate one. She could waste her chakra any way she pleased because it was always being restored. The wall on the other side was the exit. She was aware of the thriving life outside, which was enhanced by her newfound connection to chakra's essence. She broke through the barrier that had trapped her by clenching chakra into her fists. The night air was cool and there was a breeze that filled the musky cave with the scent of the forest. She nearly started crying because of the crisp, open air, the view of the trees, and the nightlife, all of which were brilliantly rendered by the Rinnegan. She had the impression that she was a prisoner who had just been freed from her cell as she left the ghetto mazo behind in its cave. Her months of darkness, pain, and suffering are all but forgotten. Laughing, Kushina threw caution to the wind and let her voice be heard by the entire forest. I'm free. The sounds of an overhead fan whirling repeatedly into her ears were the first thing she noticed. She was tired and her head was swimming. It was as though a single, enormous cushion had been placed over her entire body. It was pleasant. She was either immobile or unwilling to move. She was unable to discern, and before she could truly make sense of it, her awareness returned to the initial darkness. A blissful, lovely darkness in which not a single thought could trouble her. Our country's still crying, still enduring all this pain. I used to hate it so much, but now I want to save it from the bottom of my heart. It's a big crybaby, like I used to be, I can't just leave it. Conan. She let out a groan. She experienced pain in her arms and an ache on her left side. We've taken you off the drugs so you might be hurting for a while. You'll just have to endure it. As usual. She closed her eyes and disregarded the voice. The voice hesitated, as though not sure if the person it was speaking to was awake, then said, "There is one thing I want to know, Conan." It went on. The voice paused, seemingly considering its word choice carefully, before continuing, "I want to know if you were the one responsible." Conan scowled at herself. For what? For killing Nagato. Recollections of everything flooded back. Speaking to the undead Uzumaki Kushina, Kabuto leaves Nagato's corpse lying on a table, his eyes floating in a jar. She choked back tears, her voice becoming stuck. She was unable to comprehend her own deep concern. Shinobi perpetually perished, but Nagato. It was just her and Nagato. You don't have to talk about it if you don't want to. You did a great thing, Conan, many would have died if you hadn't done what you did. For now, just rest. The words spilled out, spontaneous and real, forgive me. The worst possible crime she could have committed was to kidnap his son. He would most likely never be able to forgive her for the irreversible error that she had made. A hand caressed her forehead, causing her to lose her train of thought. It brought comfort. You still have a fever. I'll leave you in peace. Conan reached up to grab the hand that was pulling away. Something had finally clicked for her. She wished that this comforting presence would never leave her. She seemed to have misspoken earlier, too. She had more than just Nagato left. She had discovered her true purpose in life, and she couldn't be happier about it. Conan lifted her other hand to take his lightly calloused hand in her own, despite the slow ache in her injured arm. Stay. Gazing at his own hands, Minato was fixated. Conan. Stay with me. Please. He released his hand from her clutching hands, saying, I have a mission. Allowing her arms to return to her sides, Conan tried not to show disappointment. Where are you going? When will you be back? The Hidden Rain has elected a new leader who has apparently decided to follow the agenda of the previous one, and we will make an attempt at peace talks, but as of right now, war seems to remain upon us. I've been assigned as an emissary to try for a peaceful settlement before things take a turn for the worst. Conan attempted to sit up but was restrained by strong hands that now felt callous and icy to the touch. The war is still happening? Conan asked. You can't sit up yet. The wound to your body has yet to heal. The woman let out a shocked breath. But Nagato. Conan, Minato uttered in a quiet breath. The rain needs a new leader. One who will push for peace. If it can find such a leader, the leaf would be willing to forgive all past transgressions and will aid the rain in its recovery from its loss. This leader you speak of. You want that to be me. Minato gave a nod. Conan averted her gaze and said, No. It's impossible. Nagato had me publicly exiled. The people will never take me back. How do you know? Nagato was their god. They worshipped him. He decreed that I was an enemy, and so I am. I will be an enemy until Nagato repeals that decree. Minato gave a headshake. When was the last time you've spoken to any of your citizens? Last time. Before I was sent away, I helped train them. And how many of them were actually happy to follow this God? Conan's eyes narrowed. All of them. God provided for them and gave them happiness. Conan. Your society ran on propaganda and fear. That is not a formula for happiness. Most people don't want to be killed. They want to live, and when you threaten their lives for any sign of dissent, they will do their utmost to put on a front to keep up appearances. Even if they were suffering. Even if their lives were miserable. You're not the one who lived in the rain for 30 years. You don't know how we've suffered. You don't know anything. Conan. With scowls, Minato said. I may not have lived in the hidden rain for the past 30 years, but I have been in your village several times these past few weeks. Your inner city is indeed splendid. Wealthy in its development and resources. Most if not all your shinobi live by very reasonable standards. Conan felt a little better when he heard the unexpected words. So. Minato politely asked, let me finish. Conan nodded, and Minato went on, please. If I had to make a rough estimate, I'd say roughly half your citizens are not shinobi. Conan narrowed her eyes and started to form a reply, but it got stuck in her throat. Minato closed his eyes somberly and thought about the people he'd seen, huddled in the rain beneath small overhangs. As he explained, militarization requires a concentration of resources into developing and aiding those who contribute to the military. But sometimes a village needs more than just a military. Conan. Those who do not work for the military. Where do they earn their money? Where do they get their food? How do they make their living? We have farmers here, Conan said. Conan. Only 1% of the civilians need to be farmers. What about the rest? We give charity to those in need. Then why do I see so many poor on the outskirts of our village? What charity do you give them? They get a pension. We give to them from our leftover funds. And how much as leftover funds are we talking about? What are these civilians getting, as individuals? Conan weakly bit her tongue and said, They get enough. With a fixed gaze, Minato addressed the woman he had spent so much time with, saying, You and I both know that is not true. Conan could not meet his gaze and turned away. She was aware that the battle she was engaged in was losing. The majority of her charitable endeavors had been focused on particular or niche fields. There was only so much one could offer, after all. Witnessing a starving family receive a satisfying meal at last relieved her conscience. She dared not think about what they were going to eat the next day, or the week. Resources were limited, particularly in a place where the amount of rain was so great that the fertile land was submerged underwater. Nagato had been able to expand surveillance in exchange. Since Nagato stated that it was required, it was. Conan. When the woman realized she had been silent for a while, she almost jumped. She snapped to attention at her visitor's well-known eyes as she turned her head back, calling her name with ease. The leaf will help you to solicit the support from your citizenry. With minimum casualties. You're not completely wrong. There are some who truly believe the previous leader to be God. We will do our best to quell their thirst for battle, but if worst comes to worst, they will be eliminated. For the good of all other people involved. Minato waited while the two fell silent. Finally, Conan uttered, I will be just a puppet on a throne. A puppet installed by the hidden leaf. That stigma will remain with me. No matter what you say, there will always be those who will be unhappy if I became leader of the reign. As long as you are genuinely doing good and as long as their dissatisfaction doesn't turn to violence, the problem will pass. And if it does turn to violence? Such an event will be dealt with in the way that it is usually dealt with. And with tact. Conan took time to process the words. Most likely, he was correct. She was merely justifying her own actions. Reasons to indulge in her own misery. She had grown attached to him, the fourth Hokage of the Hidden Leaf, for whatever reason, and she had a gut feeling that the longer she continued to be this way, the longer he would be willing to be with her. It was becoming painfully obvious that he did not think the same way as her, but she still felt a deep need to please him and have him meet her needs. She had lost so much already. She couldn't let him go. I have one simple condition. What condition? She stopped to give the former cage a tender look before saying, I will let you make me the leaf's puppet. Ruler if His face exuded beauty, and she felt a chill run down her spine as his blue eyes met hers with curiosity. "If you promise to stay by my side." "Forever." It was Minato who remained silent this time. Conan's heart went into a panic, realizing that he hadn't agreed right away. She gave a feeble smile. "If you can be there to help me." "I can't do it." She remained silent for a short while after being shocked by the rejection before speaking once more, her heart thumping fiercely in her chest. "Why? What you tried to do. I can never give you that level of trust again. I know I made a mistake, but I promise you. You can learn to trust me again. Minato. Please." She begged. "If you don't accept the condition, I'm refusing your offer." Minato got up from the chair, screaming, "Don't leave me." She grabbed for his arm, trying to stop him. His face took on a pained expression that added to its beauty. A physical ache in her chest made Conan tremble. "I see her every time I look at you that way. I can't keep lying to myself. To you. I'm sorry." "So that's it?" she asked, her cheeks streaming with tears. "But she's already dead. That's not fair. Even from the grave she holds you, keeping you selfishly for her own. That's..." She began to cry. "That's not fair. It's not fair." With his back to the patient's bed, Minato turned away. "For the sake of your village, will you do what is asked of you?" The tears that filled Conan's eyes obscured her vision as she let out a coarse, "I love you." Cry. "Minato. Please. I ask again. For the sake of your village, will you do what is asked of you?" With a look that made her want to shrink back, the blonde turned. That was not how he could look at her. He was simply unable to. Conan wiped away a sob, a few tears streaming down her cheeks in quick succession. "I will. I'll be leaving you then. Get some rest." As Conan noticed his back heading for the door, she let out a small breath and realized something. While her tears persisted, she let out a venomous, "Oh." in her voice. "You had a mission, didn't you?" Minato paused at the door and cast a melancholic glance at the woman. "This was my mission." He was gone before she could respond. Ignoring the medic who came in to run diagnostics, Conan stared at the hospital doorway for a considerable amount of time. He stared long after the medic had left. She sobbed uncontrollably for a few more moments before burying her head in her pillow and falling asleep. A girl surveyed the forest in front of her from the top of a little hill. The worst thing ever was working in the rain early in the morning, and the land of grass was providing them with copious amounts of it. It seems that the leaders of the smaller hidden villages were now waging war against the remaining 5 after being motivated to do so by the destruction of Kumo and the Hidden Mist. Or so they'd managed to assemble. The man they had apprehended mentioned that Kami-sama would exact divine retribution on them for disregarding the lesser hidden villages. The man had shamelessly started praising the leader of the Hidden Rain when he was questioned further about the identity of this Kami-sama. As the granddaughter of the Tsuchikage, Kuretsuchi could not help but feel that her grandfather had been tricked by the cunning old Hokage into agreeing to have you handle the land of grass, which was a major headache. Her grandfather's voice was already in her head, reprimanding her for being impolite. If it was an objective fact, then it was not disrespectful. Senju Tsunade was over 50 years old, and no matter what maneuvers she employed to make herself appear younger, the Hokage was obviously elderly. Really? What a dope her grandfather was. Just because everyone's younger than you are, she said, doesn't mean that they're not old. Talking to yourself again, Captain? Kuretsuchi turned in a circle. I told you to stop calling me Captain. You're clearly being sarcastic, and if you're not going to say it in a serious way, then don't say it at all. The man who had cut her off laughed aloud. Such a wee little thing, Captain Kuretsuchi. Kuretsuchi growled, Marichio Omeda. Do I need to remind you that it was I who spoke for you after you'd been caught for the failed kidnapping of the 9-tailed fox? My grandfather was going to have you and your gang executed. The man nodded and said, of course. My loving and kind captain saw my beautiful face and couldn't resist seeing it go to waste. How could I forget? Omeda placed a large hand on the girl's shoulders. Oh my captain. Your heart is almost as large as mine. Kuretsuchi shook. Get your hands off me or you will regret it. Omeda gave the girl a hard pat on the back and then retreated. Yes, Captain. Kuretsuchi stammered her lips, but she held back her tears. Omeda could be such a bully at times, but she knew he was generally a nice guy. It was true that he was a big, commanding man. Had he never been taught the negative effects of bullying? I assume you have something to report to me? Omeda stroked his bald spot and said, yes. My squad sighted a woman. Kuretsuchi, still hurt by the utterly disrespectful treatment she was getting from her underling, pouted and asked, and why should I care? This was not the way one handled the granddaughter of the Tsuchikage. His voice faded to a whisper, well you see. She's got all these cracks on her face and well. She looks like a zombie. Is she hostile? We don't know. She's not really doing anything, just walking around. She seems a bit lost. You haven't talked to her or anything? No. We've kept our distance. Even then, it's like she can see us even with her eyes closed. Omeda was trembling. Scary. With a nod of approval, Kuretsuchi said, she might be a censor. Nin. I'm glad you didn't say anything to her. You would have botched up communications anyway with your big, fat mouth. Send a couple of your men to alert my father of the intruder and that we are initiating contact with her. Omeda pointed at his captain and then at himself, saying, you mean? Kuretsuchi gave an eye roll. Yes, please hurry up. You're taking me to this woman. All right, Captain. As they walked, Omeda turned a quick glance at his leader. The girl's arms were crossed, and there was that look of faint distaste on her face. She was only 15 and already she was appointed as head of an entire squadron of ninja. To be a Chuunin at that age, what a prodigy she must be. But geez, what an attitude she has. Omeda scratched his head. Captain. Are you crazy? Oh no. Captain? Oh my. Yes, I'm furious. Kuretsuchi exclaimed, I'm not your captain, either. Omeda smiled and said, Captain, whatever you say. She felt the strain on her body, too. Not only did the technique push against objects around her, it produced a counteractive force on herself, and if she was not careful, she could be vaulting herself against the trees, which would only serve to further damage her already damaged body. The mud around her started to bend under pressure, but nothing else seemed to happen, and before she knew it, the technique had ended. Shutting her eyes, Kushina gathered another chakra pulse. If she focused and observed her chakra during the technique, the words returned to her automatically, Shinra Tensai. Kushina sighed as a tiny dent appeared on the ground beneath her feet. The technique demanded an almost impossible degree of balance and control. The redhead took the initiative and turned her head up, making sure to keep her eyes closed, and piped up in greeting as she saw the blobs of several chakra signatures approaching from a distance. It was the same one from before, but this time it had an accomplice. A much more accomplished shinobi by the looks of the chakra which ran through her coils. They stopped at a nearby tree. I doubt that we've ever met. You are who you are? Whitening, Omeda said, I told you. She is terrifying. Calm down. She's a censor, I told you so already. Foolish. Kuretsuchi mumbled. Could you point me in the right direction? The female yelled. Where are the directions? Kuretsuchi answered. The leaf that is hidden. That's my hometown. From where are you? Kuretsuchi narrowed her eyes suspiciously and said, we're from Iwa. If you're from the leaf, where's your headband? Iwa. Kushina considered this carefully. As far as she could recall, Iwa detested Konoha, particularly following the prank Minato had pulled on them. Still, that was all in the past, so perhaps their animosity had faded by now. What year is it? What year is it? That's a really strange question to be asking, Kuretsuchi reiterated. The year is 116. For all this time, have you been hibernating in a cave? The woman paused for a moment before responding, well, only sometimes. So you're saying that, despite not wearing a headband, you're clearly a censor. Nin? You're merely asking for directions while claiming to be lost and telling me that you've been hibernating in a cave for a while to atone for your foolishness. Kuretsuchi added the final detail after thinking for a moment. You also have these cracks on your face that look suspiciously like part of a badly performed henge. Oh, Kushina said, tracing the angular lines across her face with her hand. These cracks there. A component of me. I'm not a censor, either. I would be very grateful if you could direct me toward my home. You are aware that we have solid evidence to suspect you of being an enemy spy, don't you? A Leaf spies for hire? Nah. Our ally is the Leaf. A Kusa-based spy. I'm not sure if you've spent the last 10 years hiding in a cave or if you're just acting foolish. Kushina sheepishly laughed. Actually, I've been dead for 13 years. I was aware of it. She's a zombie. Omeda cried, gesturing to the dead woman. Despite her relative small size, the girl next to him pressed her face against the trunk of the tree they were standing on, so much so that the large man stopped mid-sentence. You idiot. She is obviously lying flagrantly and arrogantly about it. Kushina cocked an inquiring eyebrow at the charge. With his face pressed against the tree trunk, Omeda stammered, Captain? After releasing the man, she said, capture her. Yes, sir. Kuretsuchi, Captain. Kuretsuchi observed the red-haired woman deflecting blows from her underling. Despite Omeda's size and relative speed, the woman managed to evade his every move. A blow to the stomach a few moments later sent the man hurtling into a tree. Kuretsuchi scowled reflectively. You're quite powerful for a mere censor. I'm not your enemy. Kuretsuchi nodded, saying, so it appears. It had been a test, Omeda. It would have been obvious that the woman was an enemy if she had attempted to murder him or cause him great harm. But the woman fought stealthily, landing a blow that would not linger, not on Omeda's tough stomach, anyway. Come with me. I'll take you to see my father. He might be able to make some arrangements to lead you to where you're trying to go. Kitsuchi's gaze shifted from his daughter to the woman whom the girl had let inside his tent without restriction. Kuretsuchi, you've evolved into a Jonin. You can make these decisions on your own. You don't require my approval for every decision. Kuretsuchi answered, yes, Dad. The man turned to face their guest and said, almost sarcastically, well, I'm glad you still put stock in your old father's expertise. An Edo Tensai, you say? Well, the man said, putting his hand to his chin as the redhead nodded thoughtfully. I've heard that people who are resurrected using the Edo Tensai are personality-less. Please elaborate on that for me. The female gave a headshake. Your eyes are always closed, but they have black eyes too. Would you please tell us that? With an apologetic smile, Kushina said, I think that could be problematic. Huh. Well, in that case, the man said, shooting through multiple hand seals with such speed that a large rock spike suddenly protruded from the ground, piercing his guest's midriff before retreating back into the earth. Not a drop of blood was lost in the exchange, and Kuretsuchi stared into the gap that had been made, nearly gasping in surprise as fragments of paper, like substance, gathered to fill it. Kitsuchi laughed, saying, Edo Tensai for sure. That person who executed the jutsu on you was who? Yakushi Kabuto. I had never heard of him. You will have to take care of the rest on your own, but I can provide you with a map, some landmarks, directions, and a temporary escort. I recognize. What more can I do to help you in return? All right. A little bit about yourself would be helpful. Tell me about yourself, where you're from, and how you got to be in the middle of Kusa's forest. Oh. I am Kushina Uzumaki. Grateful to meet you, the woman said, holding out her hand, which the man quickly shook. I was born in Uzushio, but after my village was destroyed, I moved to the Hidden Leaf. Ah, yeah. To be honest, I have no idea how I got to Kusa. Until this morning, I was in the Hidden Mist. Kitsuchi squeezed his facial hair. A jutsu for teleportation? I believe that. How I accomplished it is really beyond me. All right. Kusei Uzumaki. Kuretsuchi will personally escort you to the edge of this forest. It's been a slow day, and it seems the shinobi of Kusa don't have the courage to show their faces, he said, turning to face his daughter. She would probably be able to help if there is anything you would like to know about the years you have claimed to have missed. Marichio Omeda, her underling, who has visited the Hidden Leaf multiple times in the past, will also be present to give you directions. Anything further? I have some questions. Please ask. How did the Leaf and Iwa reconcile once more? As of my last check, We are allies, but that's because old Onoki had to make amends, Kitsuchi clarified. I wouldn't say that we are on good terms. After learning that the Yellow Flash was still alive, some council members thought it would be a good idea to attempt to kill him. What? The Flash of Yellow? Yes. Minato Namikaze. As though not realizing the shock he was causing, Kitsuchi went on, that mass murdering monster. I don't really know the details. When you return to your village, you will have to ask him directly. And his offspring? With excitement, Kushina inquired, is his son alive? Kuretsuchi scoffed and cursed silently. You'd think she was related to them. Kuretsuchi. Her father exclaimed. Keep your comments to yourself. Kuretsuchi looked away, crossing her arms. Yes, father. Pinching at his beard, Kitsuchi asked, now where was I? Ah. Yes. His son is alive, as far as I am aware. We tried to kidnap the boy just in case the assassination failed. We even received help from the Akatsuki. Although you wouldn't know what the Akatsuki is, would you? Having been dead for 13 years? No. I wouldn't. So did you succeed in kidnapping him? Kitsuchi's expression turned disgusted. Well. No. I believe the boy came out of the ordeal completely unharmed. As far as we know, he's still in the Hidden Leaf, living happily with his father. It was difficult to miss the way the woman's face brightened at the news, and it sent Kitsuchi reeling. The woman cut him off before he could identify the conclusion he was about to reach. Thank you for your assistance and for taking the time to tell me about my village. Kushina gave a bow. I am grateful. If there's anything I can do. The man turned to his daughter and gestured toward the door. No. The pleasure was mine. I wasn't doing anything anyway. Patrolling, writing and receiving reports, reviewing plans and waiting for commands from our head commander. Boring stuff. Kuretsuchi. With a nod, the girl started to exit the tent. Let's go then. Kushina bowed once more and went out with her guide. Kitsuchi gave his beard a pinch. Kusei Uzumaki. Sounds recognizable. That was the name of the girl the Yellow Flash married, wasn't it? He scowled. He became enraged at the mere thought of that man. That deal with the leaf would never have happened if things had gone his way. Councilwoman Sanaki was thinking in the proper way. Conversely, Onoki was growing older. Still, he respected his father's choice despite his personal feelings, and if the elderly man claimed that Iwa and Konoha were allies, then by all they cared about, they were. It was unfortunate. Had it not been for the breakouts that tormented her skin and ruined any beauty she may have had in her lifetime, that red-headed beauty would have been quite lovely. She also had such a pleasant disposition. It's unfortunate that she had to wed such a monster. How unfortunate. When Kuretsuchi emerged from the tent, Marichio Omeda was not happy. What are you doing, you? Have you been eavesdropping? The man gave his stomach a rub. Captain. Are you sure we can trust her? Kuretsuchi answered, yes. In fact, we're escorting her out of the forest and you're giving her directions to the Hidden Leaf. Accurate directions. If you could just direct me to the outskirts of the Land of Fire, actually, I believe I'd be able to find my way. Kushina gave a bow. I'm in your hands. Omeda blushed and started to touch his bald spot unconsciously. Yeah. I can tell ya how to get there from here. With a map. We have a map, right? Kuretsuchi took out a map from inside her pouch. Take this one. Spreading the map in his hands, Omeda said to the red head, now we're set. You see these little arrows? Those are mountains. We don't have a lot of those in these parts, but the major ones are marked and bolded. You see this blue line right here? That's a river. Kuretsuchi grabbed the map and exclaimed, Omeda. You're a total klutz. If we're only helping her get to the borders, then I can give her the directions instead. Jumping onto a nearby branch, the girl beckoned below. Come on, I'll explain on the way. Kushina called out, okay, and leapt up to the same branch. Kuretsuchi, was it? I'm glad to receive your assistance. Don't mention it. Omeda. What are you doing? We're waiting on you. Kushina said, maybe you hurt his feelings? Nope, he'll be fine. If he can't even take that, Kuretsuchi said, waving the map. I wouldn't have made him my lieutenant. The big man below shook his head and called back. They did remake the map standards 4 years ago. The mountains used to be round and the river lines used to be yellow. I don't care. Minato fixed his gaze on his spouse's face. His mind did the exact opposite when he tried not to think about her. It would force her picture into his consciousness. Every second they spent together would leave him with nostalgic flashbacks. It was one of the few times he relished his extraordinary memory capacity and cursed it at the same time. In the same way that he would never be able to let her go, he would never forget her. Minato set the picture down, went to his bedroom, and collapsed gracefully into the bed linens. He was not surprised when he started to sense a presence by his side. After all, he was the greatest sensor. Nin of his generation, and he knew that presence wasn't real. With his head turned, Minato fixed his gaze on the vacant area beside him. He desired to move on and get rid of the ghosts of Uzumaki Kushina that were bothering him constantly. The presence reappeared as Minato covered his eyes with his forearm to block the light coming in through his bedroom window's curtains. He'd given Konan a try. Despite his best efforts, he was unable to make it work. Even in their relationship, he could only see her as a stand-in for Kushina. Regardless of how much he had fooled himself, he was unable to let go. Not from the woman he'd married, the girl who had first captured his heart, the one for whom he would give his life to grant even a brief extension of happiness. Minato felt genuine empathy for Tsunade for the first time in his life, but this empathy was accompanied by a harsh reality. The woman's heart would never belong to Jiraiya. Actually, Jiraiya most likely knew that his attempts to court her would be in vain. Still, the man never gave up trying. That was only a small portion of what shaped Jiraiya the Sannin into the formidable shinobi he is today, free from any inherent weaknesses, bloodline restrictions, artificial upgrades, or other characteristics that typically make some shinobi more formidable than others. Jiraiya was an ordinary man with nearly unattainable goals who put in more effort than anybody else to reach his position. Minato's thoughts drifted. Jiraiya had been after Tsunade for more than 30 years, if his account of events was accurate. He would assume that the other person was emotionally or psychologically damaged if it were anyone else. However, Jiraiya was one of the 3 fabled Sannin. As Minato thought about his realization, she could not help but be saddened by the fact that he was one of the most unflappable men in the world. One of the very few objectives Jiraiya would never be able to accomplish, no matter how hard he tried, was Tsunade. I've probably been rejected hundreds of times. I can understand how you're feeling. The woman ignored the man seated next to her and kept her gaze fixed on the ceiling. It's not the end of the world, you know. She didn't stop ignoring him. He scowled. God, she behaves like a half-grown girl. I expected you to have been quite attached to him, he said, waiting for an answer, but it never came. He made the decision to go on. I've had my heart broken a couple times. The first time is always the worst. It's the one that never leaves you. Jiraiya. Sensei. What is it? A smiling Jiraiya asked. The fact that she was speaking was a sign of development. You don't understand. He was the last I had to hold onto, and now I have nothing. Nonsense. Even if things seem pretty bleak now, no matter where you are in life, you will always be able to find someone or something worth holding on to. The woman said with a stubborn frown, I don't know. You could also consider the fact that even if he's rejected you now, it doesn't necessarily mean that he'll reject you in the future. You could try again in a month, a year. Maybe more. He'll eventually be able to look past what you did, if you're persistent enough. I'm sure of it. With an accusing look, the woman asked, is that what you think? You've been chasing the same woman for over 30 years. That's right. Me and Tsunade. Our story is almost a romantic tragedy. Jiraiya chuckled. But you have to understand, happiness comes in many forms. Who says I can't be happy without her? Who says I can't have something or someone else to hold on to? Even if the one I love doesn't love me back? No matter what happens to you, as long as you are alive, you will still have to wake up the next morning. You have to keep going. For as long as I live, Konan pondered. Wrong word choice, Jiraiya murmured. Look, either you forget him or you don't, but you should not let that stop you from trying to find happiness. In other venues if necessary. Trust me. As long as you are alive, you will always be able to find people willing to help you do that, people who care about your well-being. People like you? Jiraiya gave a nod. People like me. Jiraiya. Sensei, the woman said, her eyes being cleaned by the sleeves of her hospital gown as she grinned, her gratitude flowing through her. Thank you. Jiraiya cheerfully grinned, I'm glad to be seeing you smile again, Konan. Anyway, while I'm here, is there anything you'd like to talk to me about? Konan gave a shake of her head and fell silent for a while. When she spoke, Jiraiya assumed that the silence meant that she was not allowed to continue. I'll be returning home in 2 weeks. I won't be able to see you for a long time. Nor will I be seeing. She stopped and said. Him. That's not strictly true. Once you become Kage, I have a feeling we'll be seeing each other more often than you think. Even if we don't, you can always send a message. I'll come visit. I'll even bring Minato along. Jiraiya chuckled. No. Konan averted his gaze. I don't want to see him. Are you sure? The female gave a nod. Jiraiya paused to reflect, There is going to be another Kage summit after you take up the position. You will see him there. That's unavoidable. But. Jiraiya sighed. Even if things are never the same for you, I hope you two can eventually learn to get along again. You can, can't you? Konan lay quietly, her gaze once again fixed on the ceiling. At least as friends? Jiraiya asked, frowning at his own remark. It is frequently difficult, if not impossible, for two people to remain friends after they have already gotten close and lost some degree of intimacy. The degree of closeness that Minato and Konan had recently attained. The Toad Sage knew everything there was to know about it. They most likely wouldn't communicate with one another outside of a formal setting if they didn't develop a romantic connection. That was, at least, the way it appeared to be going. Konan looked at her mentor sadly. I don't know. Jiraiya said gravely, yeah. You can never know. The best that you can do is to try. I know taking down Nagato must have been hard for you, but you did the right thing. The woman averted her gaze and glared at the ceiling once more. Jiraiya let out a sigh. Perhaps he broached the topic too soon. Sensei. Jiraiya raised her gaze. The woman said, I'd like some time to think about this. I'd like to have some time alone now. Jiraiya stood up and said, all right. They're releasing you from the hospital later today, is that correct? Yes. What of it? If you need somewhere to stay before you return to Rain, I'll have my guest room set up and ready to receive you. Konan grinned and said, I understand. I'll be there later tonight. Thank you, Sensei. Jiraiya gave a nod. Having bid farewell, he walked out of the hospital room with a resolve growing within him. It was going to happen that Minato and Konan dated. He would exert every effort to see that through. It was unlikely that they would find someone else who could truly understand them as well as they could. They shared so many things in common. There was no more ideal couple in his opinion. They had a right to happiness as a couple. Jiraiya smiled. I will no longer be deserving of the title, Master of Romance, if they aren't together by the end of this year. He reached his destination as these ideas flew through his head. He straightened his coat, knocked respectfully, and waited. The door opened and a greeting was said after a few seconds. Jiraiya. Sensei. Please come in. I'll have tea ready for you in a few moments. Naruto cried out, Sasuke. Come back. And charged into the enemy's territory. Stop running. With a cackle, Sasuke called back, you'll have to catch me, Dobi. He could almost see why Naruto had done it at this point. Being cunning. Naruto tightened his jaw. Come back here, you traitor. With a tongue out, Sasuke darted past a few perplexed bystanders. The whole point of ninja flag capture was to have no strict rules other than those that were logistical and that forbade permanent injury or death. That was the fun part of the game. Taking the flag in his other hand, Sasuke hefted it. The last time they played, Naruto's team won the game thanks to his clever strategy. It was so clever, in fact, that he couldn't resist using it himself. At the beginning of the match, he had sent a copy of himself into the enemy camp because he was the only genin besides Naruto who had enough chakra to create one shadow clone. Not only did he know where the enemy team's flag was, he was trusted to hide it and serve as one of the team's perimeter guards. He heard Naruto growling indignation behind him. "You stole my idea. That's what you get for having a big mouth and for bragging all the time, Dobi," he replied. A genin suddenly leapt into the air in front of him. Kiba growled, deflecting Sasuke's fist. "So you were a traitor the whole time, huh, Sasuke?" Sasuke grinned. He already knew exactly where each unit on the opposing team was located. He was correct when he assumed Kiba would be the first defender to arrive at him. A huge white dog leapt from under him, and he dodged both as he ducked forward under Kiba's swinging arms. He pushed his fists firmly against a vulnerable spot as he went under Kiba's arms. Kiba let out a cry of agony and collapsed. The enormous white dog, Akamaru, turned around in time to witness his master being rolled off the roof. As Akamaru had to decide between saving his master and picking the game, he leapt to prevent his master from falling. A moment later, Naruto reappeared, still bellowing, "Sasuke! Come fight me like a man, you coward!" With a wince, Akamaru felt the sound of Kiba's humiliation reverberating in his head due to his sensitive ears. Sasuke stopped short of an Akamichi warehouse, deflecting multiple kunai with his own projectiles. "Oi! Tenten! What are you doing? I'm on your team." The kunoichi leapt from where she had been hiding. "Oh really? Why are you carrying our team's flag then?" With a swift genjutsu on the older girl, Sasuke declared, his Sharingan spinning, "I've recaptured it and I'm taking it back. Naruto's betrayed us. Again. He's right behind me trying to get the flag back." "Oh." Tenten nodded, not questioning Sasuke's incorrect direction of travel. "I'll deal with him then. That dead last. Who does he think we are?" With a smile, Sasuke leapt off. He heard Naruto and Tenten fighting from behind. He was suddenly pulled onto the grassy carpet that separated the two teams as something tackled him from behind. In an instant, a red material that resembled rope bound his arms and legs. The girl who'd done the wheeling and dealing gave him a thumbs up and a spooky close. I smile. "You did a good job, but I'll have to stop you here." Sasuke grimaced, starting to feel disgusted and ashamed at himself for allowing the new girl to bring himself down. Looking back, it had been clear what her plan was. She had allowed him to pass her before grabbing him out of the air, but the majority of the defenders had charged him right away. He was shocked by how irresponsible he had been. It was beyond him how he had missed her earlier. Not only was she not yet a registered genin. Seeking his teammates who were meant to meet him here, Sasuke scanned his surroundings. The girl seemed to be staring into his eyes as she kept smiling while keeping her eyes closed. It enraged me. Not even a genjutsu could he use on her. Asking in jest, "Are you looking for your teammates?" The girl said. "I took care of them." Sasuke gave a gape. "Even Rock Lee?" Ignoring the question with a smile, the girl picked up the flag that he had laboriously worked to recover. Naruto and Tenten and Kiba arrived a short while later. Naruto exclaimed, "Good work, Maki-chan. For a newbie, you're actually pretty good. Sasuke's like one of the hardest people to catch." "Thanks, Naruto-kun. Let's head into enemy territory and do some espionage." With a nod, Naruto and the other person left the area. Tenten gave Kiba a back pat. "I leave our prisoner to you. I'm taking the flag back." Kiba grinned and said, "No problem. The prisoner's in good hands." Tenten grabbed the flag and dashed back towards her starting point. There were only 2 people left on the training ground's grass after a brief pause. Fearfully, Sasuke fixed his gaze on Kiba, hoping to get the boy's attention. To his dismay, the Inuzuka had closed its eyes. Kiba let his sense of smell guide him instead. "Huh. I bet you're trying to use your Sharingan on me. Well, guess what? You can't." Kiba's grin broadened. As he laughed, the Inuzuka sent shivers down the spine of his prisoner. I've always wanted to knock you down 1 or 2 pegs, Mr. Number 1 Rookie. Kiba. You remember the rules, right? No fatal or permanent injuries? The already wildly grinning Inuzuka turned positively feral as he approached. Sasuke battled without success. Fuck it, fuck it. Screw it, screw it, screw it. Neji, the beloved prodigy of the Hyuga, scowled as he surveyed the scene. There were no intruders on the riverbank. Lee! He exclaimed. A sudden burst of green shot across the frame. Did you see anything? Neji. Neji gave a headshake. It looks like that Maki girl gave us a false alarm. I don't even see any evidence that could have made her think that the enemy were here. So. You think she's from the other side? Yeah. Neji deliberately pivoted. I sense that something negative is occurring. Who is watching over the flag? That looks like it might be your cousin, Neji. Lee, Hinata. Neji sighed. Neji said, go to the place where the enemy will need to place our flag in order to win. The boy in green spandex snapped to attention and said, I have a very important mission for you. At all costs, prevent them from continuing if they arrive. Lee's eyes widened. That's really deep in enemy territory. There were only 2 locations like that. One was at the main gate of Konoha itself, and the other was on top of the third's head on the Hokage mountain. Wishing you luck, Neji. Neji moved toward the flag, while Lee headed toward Hokage mountain, as they both left the scene. It's Naruto. Kun. I've always known that the time would come for me to meet you. I will not let you go, even though you have always been the one who has inspired me. What you have always shown me, and what you have always shown the world, I will show you. I'm determined not to give up. Even when you are my opponent. I'll complete my assignment. As her speech approached its halfway point, Hinata threw herself into a stance. I know you defeated Neji in the Chuunin exams, even though I may not be as strong as him. That is unimportant. Even if I have to confront you, Naruto. Kun, I will use every resource at my disposal to stop anyone who crosses my path. Hinata. Naruto sheepishly rubbed his head. How come, Naruto? Kun? Are you going to challenge me? Well no, it's the red-haired girl flew over Hinata with the flag in her hands, and as her eyes widened, she turned on her Byakugan just in time to see her flash her an oddly familiar and very cheeky grin. Come on. Now let's move. The young lady exclaimed. Turning to say his final goodbyes to the shocked Hyuga girl, Naruto started to walk away. You know, if you want me to fight you, I'm perfectly okay with doing that after. Hinata, I'll let you show me that you're as strong as I know you are. It's true, believe me. And with that, he was off, trailing behind his accomplice. Hinata kept staring in shock at the flag stand, realizing that she had failed because she had been preoccupied with her battle with Naruto and had failed to consider the possibility that he might have brought a companion. In an effort to preserve chakra, Hinata had kept her Byakugan closed, saving it for real fights. All she could do was apologize for her failure when Neji arrived later. Why didn't you follow them up? Neji inquired. Shaking her head, Hinata fixed her gaze on the floor. Neji sighed, realizing that his cousin had made at least 4 different mistakes and that there was no use lecturing her about them at this point. Hopefully, it's not too late. Accompany me. We must exert every effort to apprehend them. They were either too early or too late because when they got to the base of the mountain, Lee was flexing his legs in a display of extraordinary suppleness. Neji's Byakugan saw their flag stabbed into the prearranged pedestal, and as they approached, they were able to pick up 2 figures atop the Hokage monument. Neji turned off his Byakugan and his vision of Lee, Naruto, and Maki were suddenly lost, and Hinata trembled as she started to blame herself for the loss. A most youthful pair they were. The boy exclaimed, leaping up and grinning his trademark million-watt smile when they finally came into Lee's field of vision. We've been defeated. Right now, Neji. Allow the winners some time to rejoice in their accomplishment and the strength of their youth. What do you mean let them celebrate the power of their youth? Blushed Hinata. Hinata. San, spring has arrived. Now is the season of youth blossoming. What? Let us not disturb the flowering of their youth. Lee winked and threw out his fist, thumb pointing upward. B. But. Neji grabbed his cousin's shoulder and said, Hinata. Let's go. We must inform the others. Should you be concerned about the defeat, there's always the game we have scheduled for next month. We'll definitely prevail. But Neji. Nisama. Yes, Neji. Never give up. Lee exclaimed. That is the youth's creed. Anything is possible as long as we are in our youth's springtime. One cannot tread on youth. If I have to listen to him for another minute, I'm going to bash my head against a wall so that I don't have to hear him go on and on about youth. This and youth, that, Neji said, pulling at Hinata with equally stubborn force. You're accompanying me, too. However, Naruto. Blossoming. Young people. An additional girl. Neji moaned as he observed his cousin manage to project an air of jealousy while also managing to look bashful and embarrassed. Indeed. Salutations, Hinata. San. Adolescence is the season of spring. Neji quickly pulled Hinata over his shoulder like a bag of rice and fled Rock Lee as quickly as his legs and chakra could carry him, so Hinata did not hear anything more. Konan returned home by literally flying through the forests of Konoha. Obito trailed behind her, presumably because he doesn't trust me. Her nails penetrated her hand. She detested him. She detested Obito with all of her heart, but no matter how badly she wanted to hurt him, she was unable to do so for the benefit of her village. Obito was excused from all of his actions for an unknown reason. All his heinous transgressions. In addition to starting the bloodiest civil war in Hidden Mist history and killing Minato's wife, the man had actually killed thousands of people. Nevertheless, Obito received a pardon. Conversely, Nagato had been a target that needed to be eliminated. The flesh beneath her hand snapped, allowing blood to seep from the lacerations. There were a lot of contradictory, kind-hearted idiots in the Hidden Leaf. She was powerless to stop Namikaze Minato from being the most contradictory idiot of them all. All she could do was obey. It appears that the Leaf was prepared to grant a pardon for any offense as long as the offender had a voucher and was prepared to cooperate with the village. It was not an unreasonable strategy. But still. What are you thinking, Konan? There's nothing to be concerned about, Obito, she answered. Oh my goodness? Come on, let's hear it. Konan came to a stop. Now would be a perfect time to make camp for the night. She turned to face Obito, who was still sitting on a branch, his Sharingan glowing in the almost dark, as she unsealed the gear. Have you ever asked yourself why the Leaf pardoned you? Obito grinned. It's evidently because Minato Sensei feels a strong emotional bond with me. In addition, I'm prepared to go above and beyond to safeguard the village. Konan gave a wry laugh. Why the change of heart? Obito summoned several large blocks of wood with a single wave of his hand. With another, he used a cutting wind technique to split the wood apart. At last, he performed a fire jutsu, which in less than 10 seconds created a sizable fireplace. The man took a seat. It is the dying wish of the girl I love. Konan swallowed hard to contain the laughter that was about to burst out of her mouth. You can't be serious. Is it really so funny? With his Sharingan eyes trained intently on his travel companion, Obito asked a question. Is it not the same for you? Yahiko's will, to preserve the rain and its people, is what propels you. No one knows you better than me. Konan balled her fist, the lacerations on her palms hurting her enough that she could not withstand any genjutsu Obito could try. You have no idea who I am. I've observed your actions. Without even blinking an eye, you have slaughtered thousands of people. More people than any other shinobi in shinobi history have been killed, tortured, lied to, controlled, and manipulated by you. Uchiha Obito, you are a basic empath who is an inhumane monster. You dare not measure yourself against me. With a shrug, Obito grabbed a stick and threw it at the fire. Then he looked up abruptly. You're hiding there, I see. Enter the firelight so that I can see you more clearly. I'll kill you if you do anything even slightly suspicious. Konan pivoted swiftly. Nobody had caught her attention from behind. She faced Obito once more. There's no one. To silence her, Obito held up an open palm and gestured. Konan felt a jolt of nerves shoot through her body as she turned back. Grinning, a red-headed woman slowly walked into the fire's light. Obito. You're not dead. Konan was unable to speak. She ought to be deceased. Since Kabuto was buried beneath a mountain of debris, his Edo Tensei ought to have been destroyed. Has she failed to murder Kabuto? The woman gave an ecstatic greeting, but Konan spoke before Obito could reply. Kushina Uzumaki. Why are you in this place? Obito gazed into her eyes, which were ringed in purple. If what you're saying is true, then. He faced Konan with his bright red Sharingan. You weren't the one who killed Nagato. Konan averted his gaze. Not at all. Yakushi Kabuto would be that person. Ah. Him. Obito spoke introspectively. So, you killed Kabuto and Kabuto killed Nagato. Afterward, you gave the hidden leaf the impression that you carried out Nagato's murder. Konan gnawed at her tongue. How come? Uchiha Obito. Please. The conversation was interrupted by Kushina's voice. It's just an easy miscommunication. You ought not to engage in combat. Uzumaki Kushina. Konan spoke sourly. You're not allowed to talk. Tell me, why are you traveling toward Konoha? For a few moments, Kushina retreated from the woman's flaming fury before gathering her bearings. I'm returning home to see my son and my husband. Kushina was taken aback when the woman with blue hair laughed. You have such a simple mindset. How are you even aware that Minato desires to see you? Minato? Kushina kept hearing the name in her thoughts. You mean? You. Indeed. Me and Minato. He wants to get over the hurt that your absence has brought upon him. He's actually already moved on. With Minato's rejection still fresh in her mind, Konan bit her tongue, all for this woman. She spoke up. Only an Edo Tensei, that's all. Your soul will leave your body the moment you see your family, and you will vanish. Isn't that how it operates? I don't know WH. Yes you do, Uzumaki Kushina. Konan cut him off angrily. You are fully aware of what I am discussing. You will only rip open his wounds once more if you return. You may not be aware of how difficult it was for him to move past the suffering you inflicted upon him. The redhead realized what she was being told, and a tear threatened to escape her eyes. I never thought. You didn't, of course. You don't give it any thought because you don't care about the harm you could do to him or your family. Uzumaki Kushina, isn't it all about you? You're not bothered at all. You're a self-centered, avaricious bitch. Konan took a moment to consider the impact of her words and appeared to be pleased by the redhead's pain. You don't deserve him. Konan cast a quick glance at Obito, whose countenance remained unmoved. Konan kept examining the redhead closely, and as her anger seemed to have subsided, her voice grew softer. I won't stop you from seeing them if you so want, but I would suggest hiding if you do. I don't mind how you go about it. I would not have you inflict that on Minato because, in contrast to you, I am aware of his suffering. You will comply with my requests if you truly care about them and your family. Konan took a seat close to the fire after moving there. Kushina, on the other hand, didn't move. The more she thought about her revelation, the more deeply it shattered her spirit. There was a brief pause before Obito spoke. Kushina Uzumaki. I figured you would want to know how I managed to survive. Obito. Kushina tried to smile while dabbing at her eyes. I heard you had died at Canopy Bridge. Not at all. My death at Canopy Bridge was not mine. Shaking his head, Obito studied the woman he had killed, a tiny smile lighting up his face. I haven't died yet either. Would you be interested in hearing about your family from me? That would be wonderful. Konan ignored Kushina as she spoke and took a seat next to him. Obito gave a generous smile. I'll assume that you are unaware of the events that have transpired over the last 13 years and provide you with a general summary of what has happened since your passing. Once I've finished speaking, feel free to ask me anything. Then, if you would like to spend the night with us, we would be very grateful to have you. We won't hold you if not. Proceed as you please. Oh? Many congratulations. Checking the flag on the stand, Kakashi poofed into existence on the head of the third Hokage. His gaze shifted from Naruto to the girl who was with him. So which of you set the flag? And Naruto answered, I did. But Maki-chan did most of the work, so I think you should give the flag bonus to her. Well. Kakashi gave an emoji smile. Naruto, thank you for your kind gesture, but I have very strict orders. The bonus for this month goes to whoever raised the winning flag. Naruto scowled. But Kakashi. Sensei. Ah, but. Kakashi lifted one of his fingers. Once you receive your bonus, there are no restrictions on how you can use it. Should you truly desire to. Leaping to his feet, Naruto embraced his Jonin. Sensei tightly. Thanks Kakashi, Sensei. Kakashi gave an uncomfortable nod. Who is your friend there, then? I doubt I've ever laid eyes on her before. Oh, this is Maki. I'm Maki. Simultaneously, two voices answered in a surprisingly similar upbeat tone. Maki. Thoughtfully, Kakashi tapped his masked chin. Where are you from, Maki? Ah. I reside close to the Hyuga neighborhood. I am. The girl gave a shame-faced duck of her head. I am not a military person. You have to be Kakashi Hitaki. I can't wait to meet you. Kakashi gave the girl's extended hand a suspicious shake. I've heard that beneath your mask is a Sharingan. Could I see? Could I get a look? Well. With a peculiar smile, Kakashi released his Sharingan into the open. It's not every day that a civilian can possess the skills of a skilled shinobi, Maki. Chan. Who gave you the instruction? My father. The young lady answered. With a nod of understanding, Kakashi's Sharingan picked up on every behavioral cue that could be identified. Where are you from? Ah. Naturally, the Hidden Leaf. Oh. Interesting. Have you and your father ever met? My father? The young lady cocked her head. No. You ought to present him to me. What's his name, to have taught such a young girl so much skill? Kakashi smiled, sensing the girl's posture shifting slightly in a tiny, imperceptible twitch as her lips unconsciously attempted to form a frown. His name. This was the moment when Naruto broke up the questioning. Greetings, Kakashi. Sensei. Put an end to it. What you're doing to Maki. Chan is visible to me. Bah. Chan expects you to report back to her, doesn't she? Move on. With his mask back on, Kakashi covered his Sharingan. The girl was obviously hiding something, but at least she wasn't mean. And there was something strangely familiar about her face. Unable to quite put his finger on it, the girl abruptly put her arms around his waist before his thoughts could continue. I'm so glad to have met you. The girl said, her voice displaying obvious emotion. Maki, was it? Kakashi let out a sigh. I'm happy we both got to meet. Have I ever mentioned that I wasn't a fan of hugs? Oh. The girl retreated quickly. I forgot. Kakashi furrowed his brow. You. Forgot? Oh, not at all. I was just thinking of something else. Okay, well. Kakashi looked over at Naruto. Afterwards, visit the Hokage's office. You'll enjoy what she's got for you, I believe. With a cheer, Naruto reached out to give Kakashi another hug. Kakashi grinned. Take care of him, Maki. Chan. Before Naruto could get to him, the Jonin gave a brief wave and disappeared. That always works. The fair-haired woman laughed. He pivoted. Maki. Chan, let's. The girl drew him into a tight hug, cutting off his speech. Maki. Chan? Naruto. Maki pinned his arms to his side and gave him a hard squeeze. I'm so happy that we got to meet and spend time together. I'm overjoyed. You're everything I could have imagined you to be. With a sniff, the girl's voice broke. I'm so glad. Naruto stammered clumsily. Maki seemed to be about to cry into Naruto's shoulder based on the sound of her voice, and he was at a loss for words. Hey. Naruto spoke carelessly. Tonight, I'm having some friends over to my house. Sasuke, Sakura, Chan, and even Kakashi. Sensei will be present. Do you think Kakashi Sensei is cute? The girl did not reply. My father is going to prepare the food. He is an exceptionally skilled chef. I can't go. Maki murmured. The fair Haired man shut his lips. He was at a loss for what to say to the girl who was so upset. With a gentle movement, Naruto released his grip on the girl and placed a hand on her back. It's okay to cry. The familiar words made Maki tremble, and she started to cry. She buried her face in Naruto's shoulders to hide the sound of her apparent agony. She was holding on to him as if he would vanish if she let go, and Naruto tried his best to console her despite his confusion. Maki-chan. Naruto uttered, trying not to upset the girl. We can't stay here forever. We have to go. Come on, everyone will want to see us. Our team won because of you. Maki withdrew, pulling herself apart from Naruto, who watched her go, his face displaying bewilderment. Maki-chan? Maki averted her gaze. Once she took one last sniff, the girl turned and ran, saying, goodbye. Naruto. I love you. Naruto yelled, wait. But Maki had already vanished into the Valley of End. Naruto scratched his bewildered head. He regretted not being able to console the girl. He hoped to see her once more soon. When working with her, it was a lot of fun and she seemed really nice. Perhaps in the future, they could play together once more. After turning, Naruto started to descend the Hokage mountain. The girl ran until she was positive the boy had vanished from view. It sufficed. It was sufficient to see Naruto and to know that Minato survived. Naruto was now a well-mannered youngster. She had no more wishes. Kushina allowed her jutsu to wear off, causing Maki's figure to vanish in a cloud of smoke. What do you plan to do now, Kushina? Senpai? Kushina gasped as she saw Obito standing horizontally atop a cliff. Obito. You've completed your goal. You've seen your son. Kushina gave a headshake. Why have I not dispelled? Kushina. Senpai. Obito scowled, pausing at the stupidity of the question. It is because you have not found peace. What is it you still desire? Kushina paused before saying, I. Feeling guilty for her soul's unreasonable demands, she looked down and said, I want to stay with him. I want to raise my child. I want to be a part of my family. Obito answered, but you can't do that, Kushina. Senpai. As Obito spoke, tears started to fall into Kushina's lap. Once you find happiness or satisfaction with your family, your soul will leave your body, leaving behind nothing but pain. You will be able to stay with them. As long as your soul is not at peace. As long as you are unhappy or in pain. Your family will notice your pain. They will not enjoy it, that is who they are. They will suffer with you, Kushina. Senpai. I know. Then, when you finally attain happiness. Kushina put her hands to her ears and pleaded, Obito, please. Stop. The truth was already known to her. She was unwilling to hear it. Obito came to a sudden stop, and Kushina let her hands hang limply for a few silent moments. Obito said, you are in quite a predicament, aren't you, Kushina? Senpai? In fact, there is no outcome in which you can achieve happiness. You realize that now, don't you? Gazing into Obito's Sharingan eyes, Kushina looked. She was younger than Obito. He had no justification for keeping her as the senior member of the group. Why are you here, Obito? Why did you follow me? Obito descended from the precipice, softly landing on his feet. To make sure you don't do anything stupid. But your mission with Konan is subsidiary. With a vacant expression, Kushina gazed at the boy she considered to be her favorite among Minato's pupils, the same boy who had killed her and devastated her village the day she gave birth to her son. She was unable to muster any concern anymore. Everything appeared so far away. Although she was aware that it was self-serving, Uzumaki Kushina had never shown as much selflessness as her husband, the Fourth Hokage. She felt that one child's happiness and life were more important than the deaths of 1,000 villagers. This child was Uzumaki Naruto. Naruto was also still alive. Konan was not lying. Kushina was egotistical. She desired happiness and the love of those she cared about. Her eyes started welling up with tears once more. She was a self-centered, frail woman who could not even die in a way that fit a proper shinobi, and who could only hurt people around her. She refused to let go of this world and her spirit persisted in remaining in it. Tortured, it clung to her body, refusing to let go. She was left with no choice but to cry pointlessly. She cursed the name Yakushi Kabuto for returning her to the mortal world, where she had only experienced pain, for the first time since she had regained consciousness as an Edo. Tensai. Even worse, she didn't think she would ever be able to let go of her love for her son and husband, which meant she would always be in pain. You do realize that you are now technically an immortal. You can travel the land. With eternity ahead of you, you can perhaps even master the Rinnegan to the same level that the Sage of Six Paths himself had achieved in his time. Kushina gave a headshake. I don't care. You would abandon your immortality? A life of eternal suffering is no life at all. Obito grinned and said, a fair point. Have you ever thought about the possibility of reviving yourself? Kushina raised her gaze to meet Obito's. I don't know how. With a smile on his face, Obito said, I have a proposal. I can teach you how to use the Rinne Tensai to bring yourself back to life. In exchange you give me the Rinnegan. Is that possible? Contrary to what Kabuto has told you, the Rinne Tensai has its limits. According to what I've learned from Madara, I believe you will only be given one chance to cast the Rinne Tensai, sacrificing the life of the body your Edo Tensai soul currently inhabits. In exchange, the body you originally had will be returned to you. And then I give you the Rinnegan? How can I trust you? You can't. But consider this. I am many times more powerful than you are, even if you have the Rinnegan. Obito reached out a hand. If I was truly of wicked intent, I'd have sealed you with Mokuton and taken your eyes forcefully. I ask you to give me the Rinnegan willingly. In exchange, I teach you how to give yourself true incarnation. Kushina took a moment to think. Obito would take her eyes and leave her blind for the rest of her life if she agreed. It was a minor expense, and she was prepared to cover it. She extended her hand to accept Obito's handshake. Please. Teach me how to perform the jutsu. Obito watched in horror as the woman's Edo Tensai body unexpectedly crumbled into dust along with the Rinnegan. A new body started to take shape as the old one crumbled, providing the soul with a place to dwell. After finishing the jutsu, Obito looked dejectedly into Kushina's violet, perfectly normal eyes. With her eyesight not quite up to par, Kushina looked back at Obito, clearly unable to see chakra. I'm sorry, Obito, I don't know what happened. The Rinnegan just disappeared and... Obito interjected, his fists clenching at his sides, Uzumaki Kushina. There was one more thing he needed to use the Rinnegan for, even though he no longer wanted it for its intended use. Obito's body stiffened, barely able to control the sudden urge to murder the incredibly naive and self-centered redhead whom his foolish conscience had wanted to make amends for killing 13 years earlier. In retrospect, it had been impetuous and incredibly foolish on his part. He ought to have simply severed her eyes from her head. He had betrayed his last wish and the Rinnegan with his one act of kindness. All in the name of one foolish woman. Kushina scowled, Obito. Obito glared up at the lowering sky, saying, leave. Go enjoy your life. Naruto prepared the guests' tables. For Lee, Sasuke, Sakura, and Kakashi Sensei, there would be a plate. Extra preparations had to be made because Sakura had also invited Ino and Sasuke's brother had requested to attend. Sasuke left the living room, drawn by the aroma of food, to see Minato Sensei cleaning some pans as Naruto laid the table. Naruto. Do you need help? Naruto smiled. Well, it's okay. Actually, he said, pausing for reflection. We'll probably be serving buffet style since there's not enough room on the dining table for all of us. As she scraped a spinach dish into one of the numerous big bowls on the counter, Minato nodded, yup. Naruto. Why don't you go stay with our guests? I'll call all of you when I'm done. But I want to help. Minato answered, you've done enough. He gave Sasuke and Naruto a meaningful glance before saying, your garlic chicken and potatoes will be impeccable. I'll just finish up my dishes, and when the rice is done, I'll call you. Sasuke gave a nod. Alright. Naruto, Itachi is playing shogi with Kakashi. Everyone's watching. Come on. Naruto removed his apron and placed it on the back of a chair, saying, oh really? I want to see. While he arranged the dishes in a tidy line, Minato grinned and shook his head. The pride of his life was Naruto. Being blessed with such a wonderful son made him happy. Kushina would feel the same way if she were here. His mouth twisted into a grin. Suddenly, there was a knock on the door. An additional visitor? Naruto sprinted from the living room to the door, shouting, "I'll get it." Naruto yelled, "Lee. You're late." Lee bowed, saying, "Naruto. I apologize. I was in the midst of a most youthful training and I had completely forgotten the time." Lee raised his eyebrows. "I apologize." Minato called out from the kitchen, "Rock Lee." The man trailed off, saying, "Come in. You're right on time, dinner's about to." Naruto pivoted. "Dad, what?" With deliberate slowness, Minato placed the hot plate of dumplings he was holding on the kitchen counter. Calmly, he said, "I have something I have to do." "Naruto, serve the guests." Naruto answered, "Okay." His father disappeared in an instant. Naruto faced Lee, who again bowed. "Thank you for allowing me into this abode of youth," he shouted. From the living room came Ino's exclamation, "Oh God, is that Rock Lee?" "Baka. Why'd you invite Rock Lee?" Naruto shouted back, "Because he's awesome, that's why." As Lee took off his shoes. Gradually, Kushina ascended the stairs leading to her former apartment. It had been 13 years since her last visit up these steps. When she got back to the village, one of the things she saw was how much the infrastructure had changed. Clearly there was a lot that needed to be fixed after the Nine Tails attack. Still, the majority of the village had remained unaltered. One example of that was the staircase she was walking up, which she knew well. She was appreciative of Obito. Thankful for the chance he had given her. Appreciative of the sacrifice he had made. She could not help but feel sorry for the Uchiha as she made her way to the top of the second floor steps and started passing the doors leading to different apartment rooms. "Go," he had commanded her. It was a request that she could not, in good conscience, grant. He had given her so much. She had to prod him for 30 minutes with short, sharp exchanges before she could finally get him to come out of his shell. It seems that Obito desired to give his life in order to revive Nohara Rin. She had nothing to say in response to that. She was limited to saying thank you and apologizing. That was when Obito shoved her out of his way and disappeared. She felt terrible that she hadn't been able to console him. Unknowingly sacrificing his own, he had fulfilled her greatest wish. She believed she would never be able to pay back the debt. Still, she was relieved Obito didn't have to pass away. Kushina pledged to use every effort to ensure that Uchiha Obito received the compensation he was due. The redhead buried her thoughts and picked up her usual pace, keeping that resolve in mind. Step by step, she moved closer to her goal as she ascended. She felt a wave of nostalgia pass through her as she moved through the well. Known scene. She felt cozy and at home in everything around her. The same nighttime scenery, the same evening air, and the same uneven staircase that she had ascended 1,000 times. Unaware that she was walking on known ground, Kushina bumped into someone. She steadied herself and began to bow. "I'm sorry. I wasn't watching where I was. When Kushina saw the man in front of her, she froze in complete shock and lost her words. Silently gazing at one another, both of them took in the other's sight. Neither appeared to want to talk. The man brought his hands slowly up to her cheeks. His fingers moved away from her face by a millimeter. Fearful of touching her, he feared that she would vanish, as she always did when he thought he saw her. After taking the man's wrist and pressing his palm firmly against her face, Kushina said, "Minato." The blonde shuddered when it touched her. "Kushina." The voice caused an electric pulse to race through Kushina's heart, and she smiled. Minato cautiously inquired, "It's really you, isn't it?" She was hoping against hope that the woman in front of her wasn't a fraud or just another ghost. She had to be genuine for him. She needed to be sincere. Kushina released his grip and looked into her lover's hurting face. She instantly put her arms around him and gave him a firm hug. "It's really me." Minato needed some time to absorb what she had said. He questioned for a moment whether he was under a genjutsu, then he flared his chakra to refute the idea. Minato wrapped his own arms around her back slowly. She was authentic in every way. He didn't care that this might have been one of the stronger genjutsu, the kind that was immune to all but the strongest chakra. Flares. With a laugh, Minato helped the woman up off her feet while happy tears streamed from his eyes. Whether it was a dream or not, he had his wife in his arms. Kushina. It's really you, isn't it? Kushina shed the same tears and laughed with him. It's really me. His fingers were tingling with hope when he heard the redhead's response. He put his wife down 2 steps higher and spun quickly in place on the narrow step that was only 70 centimeters wide. It's really you. He exclaimed. Kushina exclaimed, continuing to laugh along with the man in front of her, it's really me. Minato fixed her gaze on her well-known violet eyes. Even his senses confirmed that she was real to him because he could feel her. Still appearing shocked, he half whispered, it's really you. Kushina stepped down, cupped her husband's cheeks in her hands, pressed her lips to his, and gave him a passionate kiss as she wrapped her arms around his neck. It's really me, she said. Willing her to stay in his grasp, he pressed her close to him. A sickening fear tore at his stomach. His heart would fall out if she vanished right now. After a brief separation, Minato grabbed his wife's shoulder and lightly thumped her up against the building's walls. He took her lips in his own and kissed her as passionately as she had done before. With a look of disbelief on his face, Minato drank in the sight of his long-dead wife before they parted. Kushina just turned her head and stared back, her cheeks blushing. Minato started to cry. I've missed you, Kushina. I've missed you so much. Kushina traced her fingers softly down the man's cheeks and across his eyes, grinning. Uzumaki Kushina. Minato stammered, struggling to hold back his tears. It's really you, isn't it? Kushina gave her devoted husband another savage hug and started crying, saying, Namikaze Minato. It's really me. The noises of the genins teasing reverberated throughout the apartment from the living room. 2 of the 4 Sharingan users of the Leaf sat in the dining room. It was unclear when or if the 4th would return, so Naruto took over the food service duties after the host disappeared for an unclear duty of some kind. Talking as he cautiously swallowed a spinach leaf, Itachi said, I think we haven't spoken since our last meeting. With his mask securely in place, Kakashi slowly raised his head from the book he was reading. Uchiha Itachi, no, I don't think we have. He returned his gaze to the pages. Itachi gazed at Jonin Sensei, his brother's mentor. My offer stands. Kakashi looked up from his book again after a few purposeful seconds of silence. I have no desire to become an honorary Uchiha, thank you very much. Is that what you'd call it? Kakashi gave a sardonic laugh. I wouldn't call it anything else. Itachi sipped her tea and said, I see. Are you averse to food, Hitaki Kakashi? Rock Lee barked at the top of his lungs from the living room, ooh. Naruto. Kun. My respect for you has increased threefold. This chicken is the very embodiment of youth. It is absolutely the best. A loud crash reverberated, and then Haruno Sakura's voice was heard even louder. My god Lee, shut up. Kakashi ignored the interruption and turned a page without blinking. What makes you think that, Uchiha Itachi? There was a sudden opening of the front door before Itachi could reply. The event's host entered the room, trailed closely by a female companion. Kakashi rotated his chair on a single leg. Minato. Sensei, where have you been? As soon as he realized what was happening, Kakashi snapped to attention and his chair fell to the ground. You have got to be fucking kidding me. Kakashi. Kushina exclaimed with joy as the group of genin came through the living room doors. It's me, Maki. To Sakura, Ino muttered, that's Maki? Sakura shook her head, saying, that's not Maki. Maki's a little girl. Under his breath, Naruto questioned incredulously, Maki? With a triumphant smile, Minato placed his hands on Kushina's shoulders. Kakashi, Naruto. You won't believe this. I don't know why, but she was standing outside. I felt her chakra, so I went to verify that it was her and she's real. She's really real. When Kakashi finally connected with the strange girl named Maki, he exhaled in disbelief. It was you. Naruto fixed his gaze on the woman he had seen in several photos. You're my mom. Minato released his hands from his wife's shoulders as she sprinted to pick up her son and give him a tender embrace off the ground. I thought I'd never see you again. Naruto. Naruto breathed, Mom. As he began to come to terms with the identity of the bubbly girl that he and the others had played ninja flag capture with all day. You came after all, Maki. Chan. Kushina answered, her son still cradled in her arms, I did. And I'm staying. His eyes snapped open as beams of light shot through the white curtains covering his bedroom window. His awareness came back to him and he spent a few moments staring at the ceiling. That realization was accompanied by the constant phantom of her. In his dream, she had made it back to her house and had miraculously revived. He had imagined holding her, kissing her, and sharing laughs with her. Subsequently, upon returning home with him, she embraced Naruto in precisely the manner he had anticipated. Everything had seemed so vivid that it couldn't be true. How come Uzumaki Kushina is still alive? He was acting with wishful thinking. It was more likely, in fact, that he had been drawn into a really nice genjutsu. With a sigh, Minato turned to face the person standing next to him and gazed at the impossibly real illusion. It was impossible for her to be lying there, next to him. He forced himself to ignore his nervousness and get ready to do what he knew had to be done. This was merely a happy illusion. Kushina had passed away. There would be no more seeing her. Kushina. He ran a hand over her cheeks and whispered. With a moan, the redhead pulled the covers over her head, sending sharp pain piercing his heart. Minato looked away. He sealed his eyelids with a mark. He used a focused outburst to devour half of his chakra. All around the apartment complex, a small radius felt the trembling of the air. As soon as they were outside, a few birds instinctively took to the air, terrified by the explosion of chakra that erupted all around them. Minato cast a glance around. He continued to sit in bed and, Kushina, groaning, peered out from under the blanket beside him. There are better ways to wake me, you know. With a short laugh, Minato drew the redhead into his arms. You're not an illusion. He sobbed. Not at all. I'm not. With a gentle reply, slightly perplexed by the blonde's strange actions, Kushina answered. How about you let me get dressed? Minato laughed as he kept his wife against him, the previous night's reality seeping into every pore of his being. How about no? Pause. Naruto heard his parents laughing loudly, and he immediately shoved a cold dumpling into his mouth and began chewing as loudly as he could. Naruto told himself, for what seemed like the 100th time since the previous night, that nothing was happening and that he was just having a bad dream. There was no other option that he wished to consider. Another, even more unsettling noise came from his parents' room, and Naruto scowled. How had Sakura phrased it during Lee's apartment exploration? The venue's acoustics were just too damned good. The acoustics of this place are too damned good. Says Naruto to himself. Pause. Happy morning. Naruto. With a carefree smile, Minato said. You wake up early. Only 6:30 a.m. has passed. Did you make your own breakfast? Kushina inquired. Not at all. I'm eating dinner from last night. After shaking his head, Naruto lowered his voice to a mutter. And I couldn't sleep with all the noise. Kushina's cheeks began to flush, and she froze. She slowly turned to face her husband, who was equally motionless, and leveled an accusing glance. I thought you said you put up a seal. I did. Minato scowled as he got back up and started heating up the food from the night before. Naruto. What? He falteredly paused. What did you hear? After shoving the final bamboo shoot into his mouth, Naruto got up. I'm heading to check on Sasuke's awakeness. Mom, goodbye. Dad, goodbye. With a quick dash out the front door, the boy disappeared into the streets, leaving his parents to fearfully stare after him. Minato, go check that seal right now. Oh. As soon as possible. Holding onto the stove, Minato dropped the pot he was holding. With a sigh, Kushina entered the kitchen to complete his work where he had left off. Minato returned to the dining commons in under 15 seconds. There's nothing wrong with the seal. Are you sure? I'm sure. Minato answered. Did you hear me yell your name from the room? You did? Yes. Kushina gave a small pout. Not at all. You weren't heard by me. So the seal's working perfectly. Minato took out a couple of eggs from the refrigerator. He trailed off, saying, if Naruto can hear us. You mean he countered your seal? Apparently. It's likely that he carries the counter seal with him. Kushina turned around and drew her shocked husband into an exuberant embrace, forgetting her earlier embarrassment as she lit the stove before her. We are so proud of our genius son, she exclaimed. With a smile, Minato patted her head using one of the eggs he was holding. I know. Pause. As he entered the Uchiha compound, Naruto grinned. It was still unclear to Sasuke that he had created a counterseal to counter his wards. It was far too simple. Perhaps he ought to inform his friend about the counterseal. In a flash of insight, Naruto raised his sleeve to scowl at the other counterseal he created months earlier for an entirely different use. Oh. He said this quietly to himself, then shrugged and crept covertly into Sasuke's room. Naruto's face glowed with pure anticipation as the Uchiha dozed off in his bed. Itachi was putting on a shirt across Sasuke's room when Sasuke's voice abruptly rang out. Naruto. Holy moly. Please leave my room. Naruto's laughter reverberated throughout the house as Itachi shook his head and grinned. He slid the door of his room open and got ready to face the intruder. Whether or not the fourth is his son, breaking into the Uchiha family's house does not go unpunished. He heard Naruto chatting with his brother as he walked to Sasuke's door. Itachi listened in silence to the lighthearted banter inside. How wonderful our acoustics are.
So that's it for today. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Don't forget to like, share and subscribe to the channel for more awesome stories like this. Thank you. See you all in my next video.